Chapter 1: The Reclamation of the Will, an Introduction to Volitism. In an era dominated by simulacra, where the self is fractured by the demands of modernity and the illusions of external validation, volitism emerges as a path towards transcendence and liberation. At its core, volitism is the philosophy of regaining mastery over one's mind, emotions, and volitional essence, leading to the ultimate harmony with the divine will. This introductory chapter lays the groundwork for understanding volitism's ontology, epistemology, and its goals of self-enhancement, outlining how it serves as both a guide for individuation and a bridge to divine alignment. The ontological foundation of volitism. Volitism begins with the premise that the universe is a symbolic projection of a fractured Godhead, splintered into individuated experiences. This cosmology aligns with the Hermetic axiom as above, so below, suggesting that the struggles of the individual reflect the cosmic drama of divine disunion striving towards reunification. The material world is not merely a passive stage for existence, but a dynamic reflection of internal and universal consciousness, where the fragmented psyche and the fractured divine mirror one another. Within this framework, the will becomes the instrument through which the individual transcends fragmentation. It is both a microcosmic expression of the divine will and the key to reestablishing harmony with it. Unlike deterministic philosophies that reduce the individual to a victim of circumstance, volitism asserts that human beings possess an intrinsic capacity to reclaim autonomy and line their finite will with the infinite. Epistemology, the path to knowing the divine will. Volitism's epistemology rests on the pursuit of self-knowledge as the foundation for cosmic understanding. Drawing from Jungian individuation, the philosophy emphasizes confronting the shadow, integrating the disparate elements of the self, and awakening the latent potential for volitional mastery. This journey is not one of intellectual theorizing alone, but of expressional practice, meditative introspection, symbolic resonance, and disciplined action. In pursuit of knowledge, volitism is deeply influenced by the ancient wisdom traditions of Zen, Taoism, and Vedanta. Zen teaches the value of silence and unasking, stripping away the illusion to reveal truth. Taoism offers the concept of alignment with the Tao, the natural flow of existence, and Vedanta guides one towards dissolving the ego to discover the unified self. Similarly, volitism draws from the concepts of dharma, which is cosmic law, and rita, which is cosmic order, framing alignment with the divine will as both an ethical and existential imperative. Logos, the divine reason underlying all creation, further contextualizes the ontological unity that volitism seeks to restore. While volitism honors these traditions, it also differentiates itself by integrating the dynamic interplay of Nietzsche's Übermensch, or overman, with a dialectical framework of suffering and overcoming. Nietzsche's Übermensch enhanced. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch, or overman, or superman, represents humanity's potential to transcend conventional morality and limitations, creating one's values and becoming a higher expression of existence. While profound, volitism expands this vision by recognizing the necessity of aligning self-created higher will with the universal divine will. The journey towards the overman, in Nietzsche's terms, can often seem solitary and detached from the broader metaphysical context. Volitism offers an enhancement by introducing the dialectic of suffering, the thesis, and overcoming, the antithesis or antithesis, with a synthesis being not merely transcendence, but self-alignment with the divine order. Suffering is not viewed as a curse to be avoided, but as a forge through which the will is tempered. Every moment of adversity becomes an opportunity to reclaim one's agency, refine one's character, and move closer to the divine will. This dialectical process transforms the individual not into an isolated creator of meaning, but into a co-creator with the divine. Through this, Volatism refines the Übermensch into an archetype that is both empowered and harmonious, a transcendent being who wields their will in resonance with the cosmic symphony. Goals of Volatism. The ultimate aim of Volatism is twofold. First, to rewild the fractured mind and reclaim agency over one's will. And second, to achieve a state of harmony with the divine will, where the personal desires align with the universal order. This alignment is not a passive surrender, but an active participation in the ongoing creation and evolution of existence. To reclaim the will is to break free from the simulacrum, the false narratives and societal constructs that condition the individual to react rather than act. It is to become the author of one's story rather than its reader. Through praxis, meditation, and dialectical engagement with life's trials, Volatism enables the individual to rise above the reactive self and embody the proactive, volitional force of existence. In harmony with the divine will, the individual transcends the illusion of separation and becomes a living expression of universal unity. This state of being aligns with the Zen concept of Satori, awakening, the Taoist idea of Wu Wei, effortless action, and the Vedantic realization of Atman being one with the Brahman. It is the culmination of the dialectical process where the fragmented self merges with the infinite, and the finite becomes a vessel for the divine. The call to reclaim the will. The journey of Volatism begins with a choice: to remain entangled in the illusions of the simulacrum, or to step into a path of self-mastery and divine alignment. It is a philosophy that demands courage, resilience, and unwavering commitment to growth. Yet it is also a philosophy that promises a profound transformation, offering not merely survival, but flourishing, not merely existence, but transcendence. Through this treatise, we will explore the principles, practices, and metaphysical insights that form the foundation of Volatism. Each chapter will serve as a step to the path to reclaiming the will and aligning it with the divine. The journey may be arduous, but the destination, a life of harmony, purpose, and transcendence, is worth every step. Let this be the beginning of your reclamation. Let this be the dawn of your alignment with the divine will. Chapter 2. The Shattered Prism. The Cosmology of Volatism. At the heart of Volatism lies a profound cosmological narrative that seeks to answer the eternal question: why does something exist rather than nothing? This story does not merely seek to satisfy intellectual curiosity, but serves as a guiding mythos, a symbolic framework for understanding our place in the grand tapestry of existence and our journey towards unity with the divine will. The divine unity and the fractured light. In the beginning, there was a unity, a boundless, undifferentiated oneness, beyond form and thought, containing within itself infinite potential. This primordial state, the pleroma, existed in perfect harmony, its essence pulsating with the divine will, an unbroken symphony of being and becoming. But unity, though complete, yearned for self-awareness. In this infinite stillness, the divine will desired to know itself, to experience its own boundless essence. Yet, for awareness to arise, there must be contrast. For light to be seen, it must shine against a shadow. Thus, the one fractured itself, a divine prism, refracting its unity into the multiplicity of existence. This fracturing was not a fall from grace, but an act of creation, a cosmic experiment in self-discovery. Each shard of the prism became a fragment of the divine, an individuated aspect of the whole, endowed with the will to explore, create, and return. The universe, in all its vastness and complexity, is the result of this cosmic refraction, a playground of experience where the divine learns through the eyes, hands, and hearts of its fragments. The illusion of separation. In this act of self-dispersal, a veil was drawn, a simulacrum of separation obscuring the unity from the divine. The individuated fragments, now cloaked in the illusion of autonomy, perceives themselves as isolated beings, cut off from the whole. This illusion is the root of suffering. For in forgetting our unity, we experience longing, fear, and dissonance. Yet even in separation, the divine will remains imprinted within each fragment, like an unbroken thread connecting all things. This thread is the essence of volatism, the call to awaken, to remember our origin, and to reclaim the harmony that lies beneath the veil. The dance of duality. To better understand the fractured cosmos, volatism embraces the concept of duality as the fundamental structure of existence. Light and shadow, order and chaos, creation and destruction. These polarities are not only opposites in conflict, but complementary forces in a dynamic dance. It is through this interplay that existence evolves, expands, and moves towards synthesis. The dialectic of duality is central to the cosmology of volatism. The universe itself can be seen as the unfolding thesis of unity, its antithesis in fragmentation, and the ongoing synthesis as the fragments strive to return to the wholeness. This process is not linear, but cyclical, an eternal rhythm of expansion and convergence, mirroring the breath of the cosmos itself. The role of the individual. As individuated aspects of the divine, we each carry a spark of the original unity within us, a fractal of the infinite. Our lives, struggles, and triumphs are not meaningless. They are the means through which the divine will experience and evolve. Every act of overcoming, every moment of transcendence contributes to the cosmic synthesis, the reassembly of the shattered prism. The individual, then, is both the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer. To align the divine will is to recognize one's role as co-creator in this grand process, to actively participate in the harmonization of duality and the reclamation of unity. Why something, not nothing? In the context of volatism, the question of why there is something rather than nothing finds its answer in the divine will's inherent nature. To exist is to express, to create, to explore the infinite permutations of being. Nothingness, though absolute in its purity, is static, inert, and unknowing. Somethingness, by contrast, is dynamic, evolving, and self-aware. The act of creation, the fracturing of the divine prism, was not a rejection of nothingness, but an embrace of possibility. It was the divine will's declaration that to be is to become, that stillness must give way to motion, and that unity must unfold into multiplicity to truly understand itself. The call to reunify. The cosmology of volatism is not merely a story of origins, but a call to action. To exist as a fragment of the divine is to carry both the burden and the gift of free will. It is to navigate the tension between separation and unity, to suffer and to overcome, and to move even closer to the alignment with the divine. Through volatism, we reclaim the light of the fractured prism and direct it inward, reversing the outward flow of dispersion. Like the alchemical process described in The Secret of the Golden Flower, we turn the light back upon itself, illuminating the path to wholeness. This act is not merely personal, but universal. For in reclaiming our own will, we contribute to the cosmic synthesis. A cosmos in motion. The universe is not static. It is alive, evolving, and unfolding in an eternal dance of creation and return. Each of us, as individuated fragments, is a vital thread to this tapestry, a note in the cosmic symphony. To live in alignment with volatism is to recognize this truth and to step into the role of co-creator, embracing the dialectic of duality and the ongoing journey toward unity. Let this understanding serve as a foundation for the journey ahead. As we delve deeper into the principles and practices of volatism, remember, the cosmos itself is alive within you, and your will is the key to unlocking its mysteries. The shattered prism may be fractured, but its light is eternal, and through volatism, we guide that light home. Chapter 3, The Labyrinth of Illusion, Simulacra, Shadows, and the Tension of Becoming. The path of volatism begins in a labyrinth, an illusory world shaped by simulacra, where the symbols are distorted, archetypes are fragmented, and the shadow self grows unchecked. This chapter explores the forces that bind the will and obscure its alignment with the divine. It examines the interplay of symbols, archetypes, tension, and annihilation as both barriers to and catalysts for transcendence, weaving in a dimensional analogy to reveal the limits of perception and potential for higher understanding. The simulacrum, the great illusion. The simulacrum is the veil of distortion that separates the individual from truth. It is the realm of appearances where meaning is replaced by hollow symbols and authentic existence is supplanted by reactive, conditioned patterns. The simulacrum is not merely external, it is internalized, shaping thought, emotion, and behavior. In a world dominated by the simulacrum, symbols lose their original potency. They become detached from their archetypal roots, mere echoes of the divine resonance they once held. They are no longer faithful. For example, a candle, which once symbolized the eternal flame of divine illumination, becomes reduced to a mundane object of utility. Volatism challenges us to rediscover the symbolic resonance within the simulacrum, to peel back its layers and uncover the truth it obscures. Archetypes and the shadow. Central to volatism's epistemology is the concept of archetypes, the universal symbols and patterns that structure both the psyche and the cosmos. Archetypes, in their pure form, guide us towards individuation and alignment with the divine will. Yet, when distorted by the simulacrum, they fragment, creating dissonance with the psyche. The shadow is the repository of these fragmented aspects, the unacknowledged, repressed, and denied parts of the self. It is the embodiment of tension, a force that pulls us away from wholeness while simultaneously offering the opportunity for growth. In Jungian terms, the shadow must be confronted and integrated, for it holds the key to unlocking the latent potential of the will. Through volatism, the shadow is not seen as an enemy, but as a crucible. It is through engaging with the shadow that the individual learns to navigate the dialectic of suffering and overcoming, transforming tension into transcendence. Tension and the dimensional analogy. Tension is the thread that runs through all aspects of existence. It is the pull between light and shadow, unity and fragmentation, self and other. In the cosmology of volatism, tension is not just a flaw, but a feature. It is the dynamic force that drives creation, evolution, and transcendence. Here, the dimensional analogy becomes vital. Just as a two-dimensional line cannot comprehend the depth of a cube, and a three-dimensional cube cannot fathom the hyperdimensional tesseract, humans are bound by the constraints of their perception. The tension we experience, the dissonance, longing, and suffering, stems from this limitation. We sense the existence of higher dimensions, of greater truths, but cannot fully grasp them. Volitism invites us to engage with this tension, to use it as a ladder rather than a wall. By acknowledging the limits of our perception, we open the door to a higher understanding. This is not a linear process, but an iterative one, a spiral ascent towards alignment with the divine will. The role of annihilation. Annihilation is both a literal and symbolic theme within volitism. On a metaphysical level, it represents the meeting of opposites, the collision of particles and antiparticles, light and shadow, self and other. In this collision, the simulacrum dissolves, and the fragmented aspects of the self are obliterated, leaving behind only the unified essence of the divine will. The concept of annihilation is mirrored in esoteric traditions, where the ego must be dissolved to reveal the true self. It is also reflected in the physical universe, where annihilation gives rise to transformation and energy. For volitism, annihilation is not destruction for its own sake, but a necessary stage in the process of becoming. It is the alchemical solve et coagula, dissolution and recombination, that leads to wholeness. Symbols as keys to higher dimensions. Symbols are the bridges between dimensions, the tools through which we can glimpse the higher realities beyond our perception. In the labyrinth of the simulacrum, symbols must be rewilded, their resonance restored. Volitism teaches us to engage with symbols not as mere objects, but as living expressions of the archetypes they embody. By aligning with these symbols, we align with the cosmic order they represent, transcending the limits of lower dimensional perception and moving closer to the divine. The tesseract of the will. The ultimate goal of volitism is to ascend beyond the confines of the simulacrum and perceive the tesseract of the will, a hyperdimensional understanding of existence where the finite self-aligns with the infinite. This requires the integration of the shadow, the reclamation of symbolic resonance, and the embrace of annihilation as a transformative force. This journey is not easy, for it demands the dismantling of illusions, the confrontation of tension, and the surrender of the ego. Yet, it is through this journey that the fragmented self becomes whole, the shadow becomes light, and the individual becomes a vessel for the divine will. The call to navigate the labyrinth. The labyrinth of illusions is vast and treacherous, but it is not without its exits. The path of volitism provides the tools to navigate this maze, to reclaim the symbols that guide us, and to align our finite wills with the infinite. In doing so, we do not merely escape the simulacrum, we transcend it, becoming co-creators of the cosmos and heralds of divine unity. Let us move forward with this understanding, prepared to face the shadows, reclaim the light, and embrace the annihilation that leads to rebirth. The labyrinth may be daunting, but the path to this tesseract lies within, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 4. Praxis of Volitism, Building the Indomitable Will. The praxis of volitism is the art of reclaiming and fortifying the will, transforming it into a force of profound resilience, mastery, and harmony. This chapter explores the principles, practices, and philosophies that equip the individual to overcome suffering, transcend the simulacrum, and align with the divine will. Drawing on wisdom from the greatest thinkers, mystics, and revolutionaries, we weave their insights into a uniquely volitist framework, transcending their limitations to forge a path both rigorous and liberating. Part 1. Foundations of the Volitist Will. Suffering as the Forge. The Volitist framework begins with a bold redefinition of suffering, not as a curse to be avoided, but as a crucible in which the will is forged. Suffering is the necessary tension between what is and what could be, the friction that catalyzes growth. This echoes Nietzsche's idea that one must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. Yet Volitism extends this by offering specific tools to harness suffering, transforming it into fuel for volitional mastery. Drawing from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, Volitism emphasizes the redemptive power of purpose. When suffering is integrated into a greater narrative, a cosmic alignment with the divine will, it becomes not just an obstacle, but a teacher. Just as the body adapts through hormesis, growing stronger under controlled stress, so does the will. Obstacles are embraced as opportunities for refinement, their resistance honing the individual into a sharper, more deliberate force. Part 2. Practices of the Volitional Mastery, Building the Resilient Self. The Transparent Eyeball and Symbolic Resonance. The concept of the transparent eyeball, derived from Ralph Waldo Emerson, symbolizes the dissolution of the ego in service of perception untainted by preconception. In Volitism, this practice manifests as an exercise of radical awareness, where the individual attunes themselves to the symbolic resonance within their environment. Practically, this involves daily rituals of contemplation, such as gazing at a candle while simultaneously observing a distant point of light. For example, Venus, if it is the sunset star at the time, is a great awakener. The flame represents the inward focus of the will, the eternal spark of divinity within. Venus represents the alignment with the cosmic order, the broader unity of the divine will. Together, these symbols ground the individual in the present while expanding their awareness beyond the self. Self-hypnosis and NLP for volitional alignment. Neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, and self-hypnosis are indispensable tools within the Volitist arsenal. These practices allow the individual to reprogram their inner narratives, replacing limiting beliefs with empowering affirmations. By consciously directing the subconscious mind, one can align their volitions with their highest values and intentions. Exercises include creating mental anchors for courage, resilience, and focus. For instance, a practitioner might visualize themselves as a towering mountain, unshaken by storms, to reinforce their inner stability. These techniques are not merely psychological, they are metaphysical acts of self-creation, aligning the finite self with the infinite divine will. Shadow integration, embracing the inner adversary. The shadow, as described by Jung, is the repository of all that is repressed and unacknowledged. In Volitism, the shadow is not to be feared or suppressed, but confronted and integrated. The shadow is both adversary and ally, a necessary tension that, when reconciled, transforms weakness into strength. The process of shadow integration begins with acknowledgement. Journaling, meditation, and self-reflection are used to identify the fragmented aspects of the psyche. Through active imagination, the individual dialogues with their shadow, seeking not to destroy it, but to unify its opposite forces. This dialectic mirrors the Volitist principle of suffering and overcoming, where the synthesis of opposites creates wholeness. Part 3. Exemplars of Volitism, Models of the Indomitable Will. Thich Quang Duc, I apologize if I'm butchering that name. Just as an aside, if you were to look up a Rage Against the Machine cover of The Burning Monk, you'll see the photo of Thich Quang Duc, and I'm sure I am butchering his name, so I apologize. He's the monk who self-immolated in protest. But continuing, the story of Thich Quang Duc, the Vietnamese monk who immolated himself in protest of oppression, stands as a pinnacle of volitional mastery. His act of self-immolation was not one of despair, but of transcendence, an alignment of individual action with the highest moral and spiritual truth. In Volitism, Thich Quang Duc represents the apex of volitional harmony, the ability to act with unwavering conviction. Even in the face of ultimate suffering and agony, he did not make a sound while he slowly burned to death. His flame is a symbol of the will's capacity to transcend physical limits, aligning wholly with the divine will. This is the goal of Volitism, not merely to endure suffering, but to transform it into an act of divine creation. Teddy Roosevelt and the stiff upper lip. The life of Teddy Roosevelt exemplifies the Volitist ideal through resilience through action. Faced with personal tragedy, failing health, and physical frailty, laterally, Roosevelt chose not to succumb, but to rise above his circumstances through deliberate effort. His philosophy of this strenuous life aligns with the Volitist principle of hormesis, the idea that growth arises from adversity. Roosevelt's example reminds us that the will must be both immense and disciplined. It is not enough to act. One must act with intention, balancing strength with humility, power with grace. Part 4, the path to annihilation, dissolution, and rebirth. Volitism culminates in the principle of annihilation, not as destruction for its own sake, but as the dissolution of the ego and the simulacrum. Just as a particle and its antiparticle annihilate to release pure energy, so too must the individual confront their antithesis to achieve transcendence. The ritual of symbolic annihilation. This advanced practice involves a symbolic death and rebirth. Through guided meditation, the practitioner visualizes the dissolution of their ego, allowing their fragmented self to be annihilated in the light of the divine will. This process is both terrifying and liberating, requiring absolute surrender to the infinite. The goal is not self-destruction, but self-transcendence. In the annihilation of the finite, the infinite is revealed. The individual becomes a vessel for the divine, no longer bound by the illusions of simulacrum. Synchronistic awareness and the divine will. Finally, Volitism teaches the practitioner to recognize and align with synchronicities, moments of meaningful coincidence that reveal the hand of the divine. These events are not random, but expressions of a higher order, guiding the individual towards their ultimate purpose. By cultivating awareness of these signs, the practitioner learns to navigate the labyrinth of life with grace and intention. Each synchronicity becomes a stepping stone, leading them closer to the alignment of their will with the divine. Part 5, the Volitist Manifesto, becoming a force of creation. The praxis of Volitism is not merely a philosophy, but a way of life. It demands discipline, resilience, and unwavering commitment to growth. Yet it offers profound rewards: the reclamation of agency, the transformation of suffering, and the ultimate harmony with divine will. The journey is arduous, but is also sacred. The building of the indomitable will is the practitioner becomes not just a survivor, but a creator, a force of divine unity in a fractured world. Let this praxis be your guide. Embrace the obstacles, confront the shadow, and align your finite self with the infinite. The path is before you, the flame of Thich Quang Duc, the mountain of your own resilience, the light of Venus on the horizon, the candle in your vision. Step forward with courage, for the divine will awaits. Chapter 5, the path of the Volitist, practices for reclaiming and aligning the will. Having laid the philosophical foundation and explored the principles of Volitism, we now enter the heart of its praxis. This chapter is the roadmap, the manual for action. Here, we move from theory to practice, from abstraction to embodiment. Just as one cannot learn to swim without entering the water, or master a bicycle without the wobble of balance, the volatilist must engage directly with these practices to reclaim their will and align it with the divine. This is where the true journey begins. The path is not easy, but it is transformative. Through focused meditation, breathwork, deliberate practice, and symbolic rituals, the volatilist learns not only to master their will, but to unify it with the greater cosmic order. Part 1. Reclaiming the will. Foundational practices. The volatilist posture, embodying strength and resilience. Every practice begins with how we hold ourselves. The volatilist posture is not merely physical, it is an expression of one's inner resolve. Stand tall, feet grounded firmly on the earth, spine aligned, shoulders back but relaxed. Imagine a golden thread pulling gently upward from the crown of your head, connecting you to the divine. This posture communicates both strength and humility, an openness to receive and a readiness to act. The posture should be assumed during all, this posture should be assumed during all meditations, rituals, or moments of focus. Over time, it becomes a physical anchor for the will, a reminder of your volitional power. The breath of intent, harnessing the divine flow. Breath is the bridge between the physical and metaphysical, between the conscious and subconscious mind. In volatilism, breath is a tool for focus, resilience, and alignment. The foundational breathwork practices is the breath of intent. Inhale. Breathe deeply through the nose, visualizing the energy of the divine flowing into your body. Feel it energize every cell. Hold. Pause at the top of your breath. In this stillness, focus your will on your intention, whether it be courage, clarity, or alignment. Exhale. Release the breath slowly through the mouth, imagining all resistance, fear, or distraction dissolving into the void. Repeat. Perform this cycle for 5 to 10 minutes, gradually lengthening each phase of the breath as your focus deepens. This practice is the cornerstone of volitional focus. It can be used before any challenge, as a daily ritual, or as a tool to reclaim agency in moments of stress or indecision. Part 2. Focus meditation, the forge of the will. Meditation in volatilism is not an act of passive stillness, but of active engagement with the mind and will. It is a forge where distractions are burned away, leaving behind the purified essence of intention. The flame and the star, a dual focus meditation, uniting the finite with the infinite. Set the scene. Light a candle in a dark room. Sit before it in the volatilist posture. If possible, position yourself where you can also see a distant light. Example, a star or the moon through a window. Focus on the candle. Begin by gazing at the flame. Let its warmth and movement draw your attention inward. Visualize it as the spark of your own will, the divine fire within. Shift to the star. After a few minutes, shift your gaze to the distant light. Let its vastness remind you of the divine will, the infinite order beyond your individuality. Alternate. Move your focus back and forth between the flame and the star, integrating the two. Feel the connection between your inner will and the greater cosmic order. Close. Conclude by closing your eyes and visualizing the flame and the star merging into a single point of light within your mind's eye. Sit with this unity for as long as you feel called. This meditation strengthens your ability to hold dual awareness of yourself and your place within the divine. It cultivates clarity, focus, and alignment. Shadow work meditation, confronting the inner adversary. To reclaim the will, one must face and integrate the shadow, the unacknowledged fears, desires, and aspects of the self that undermine volitional mastery. Set the scene. Sit in a quiet, dimly lit space. Close your eyes and focus on your breath. Enter the shadow space. Visualize yourself descending into a vast cave, the symbolic space of your unconscious mind. Meet the shadow. Imagine a figure emerging from the darkness. This is your shadow, an embodiment of what you fear or avoid within yourself. Observe it without judgment. Dialogue. Engage in a silent conversation with your shadow. Ask it what it needs, what it fears, and what it can teach you. Integration. As the dialogue concludes, visualize the shadow merging into your body, its energy becoming a part of your strength. This practice is not a one-time event, but an ongoing journey. Each encounter deepens self-awareness and transforms inner conflict into inner power. Part 3, strengthening the will, practical exercises. Obstacles as training grounds, hormesis of the mind. Every obstacle is an opportunity to strengthen the will. This principle is practiced through deliberate exposure and controlled challenges, both mental and physical. Cold exposure. Take cold showers or immerse yourself in cold water. The discomfort trains your ability to endure and focus your will. Mental challenges. Engage in tasks that require intense focus and persistence, such as solving complex problems or mastering a new skill. Physical strain. Push your body through exercise or physical labor, using each moment of struggle as a reminder of your capacity to overcome and endure. Approach each challenge with the mindset that it is a gift, a chance to refine your volitional mastery. Volitional anchoring, rituals of alignment. Create daily rituals that anchor your will to your highest intentions. Morning intention setting. Upon waking, spend 5 minutes visualizing your goals for the day and aligning them with the divine will. Evening reflection. Before sleeping, journal your success, struggles, and moments of alignment. Reflect on how you can refine your actions tomorrow. Symbolic tokens. Carry a small object, example, a stone or a pendant, that symbolizes your will. Use it as a reminder of your commitment to the path. Part 4, the divine synthesis, merging the will with the infinite. The ultimate goal of the Volatus practice is the alignment of the individual will with the divine. This is not an act of submission, but of transcendence, a harmonization of the finite and the infinite. The breath of unity. This advanced practice involves synchronizing breath, intention, and visualization. Inhale. Breathe deeply, imagining the divine flowing into you. Pause. At the peak of the breath, affirm silently, I align my will with the divine. Exhale. Release the breath, visualizing your individual intentions merging with the greater cosmic order. Repeat. Continue until you feel a profound sense of unity and peace. These practices form the backbone of the Volatus path, empowering the individual to reclaim their agency, overcome suffering, and step into alignment with the divine will. Each is a step towards mastery, a movement from the simulacrum towards transcendence. Chapter 5, The Volutist in Harmony. Seeking understanding, the mirror of projection. Volutism teaches that the external world is not separate from the internal, but a projection of the fractured psyche, mirroring the divine Godhead's shattering into individuated experiences. This fundamental principle invites the Volutist to approach conflict, tension, and suffering as reflections of inner disunity. The shadow as a reflection of the fracture. When tensions arise, they are not merely external disruptions, but symbolic echoes of the internal fracture. The volatilist asks, what shadow of mine might this interaction reflect? What can this conflict teach me about my will, my fear, or my attachments? This process reframes the external world as a mirror, a projection of the unresolved, fragmented aspects of the psyche. Each interaction becomes a revelation of the internal struggle to reunify the fractured will with the divine. For example, a confrontation with a controlling individual may reveal a disowned fear of chaos within yourself. Witnessing injustice may stir dormant guilt or anger about your own complicity or passivity. Feeling rejected might expose a shadow rooted in self-worth or attachment. The fractured world as a symbolic stage. Building on the cosmological idea that the universe is a projection of the shattered divine Godhead, every experience in the external world becomes a symbolic teaching. The material plane is the stage on which the fractured divine will plays out its story of separation and reunion. A volatilist views every conflict, every joy, every loss as part of this grand narrative. The question is not just, why is this happening to me? But what does this symbolize in the journey towards wholeness? For instance, the forces of attraction and repulsion in relationships reflect the interplay of creation and annihilation within the universe. This mirrors the dance of particles and antiparticles, as well as the synthesis of opposing archetypes within the psyche. Tensions as catalysts for reunification. Rather than resisting or escaping conflict, the volatilist engages with it as an essential catalyst for reclaiming volitional agency and integrating fractured aspects of the self. Conflict is the alchemical fire through which the will is purified and made whole again. Practices for engaging the projection. Projection journaling. Reflect on external tensions or conflicts and identify what internal shadow or archetype they might symbolize. Fracture meditation. Visualize the external world as a projection of the internal divine fracture. See each interaction, person, or challenge as a symbolic fragment of yourself seeking reintegration. Empathy through the lens of projection. Volatilism's understanding of projection fosters not only self-awareness, but also deep empathy. Recognizing that others, like yourself, are projections of this fractured divine psyche, you can view their struggles, fears, and actions as symbolic mirrors of your own inner dynamics. Universal archetypes in others. Just as your external world reflects your internal state, so does everyone else's. By recognizing the archetypal struggles within others, you can dissolve judgment and foster compassion. This person's anger mirrors my own suppressed rage. Their fear reflects the vulnerability I deny within myself. This realization doesn't mean condoning harmful actions, but understanding their roots in the fractured psyche. Through this lens, empathy becomes a form of healing, both for yourself and others, as you see their journey as intrinsically tied to yours. Practices for empathy and projection. Archetypal mapping. When encountering someone's struggle, ask what archetype they might embody and how it resonates with your own journey. Mirror work with others. In moments of tension, silently ask, what shadow of mine might this person reflect? Chapter 5.5, Rewilding the Mind, Detoxifying the Pollutants of the Simulacrum. To reclaim agency of the will and align it with the divine, the volatilist must first recognize the distortions introduced by the artificial simulacrum. The simulacrum, a web of false narratives, social constructs, and symbolic pollution, clouds perceptions, leading the individual further from the true divine intent. It distorts the external world's reflection of the internal psyche, leaving the images fractured and unclear. The polluted mirror of the simulacrum. In its natural state, the external world functions as a pure mirror of the internal psyche, reflecting its beauty and harmony. However, the simulacrum acts as a pollutant, warping this reflection. Advertisements, propaganda, and the superficial ideas fill the mirror with false images, obscuring the divine truths beneath. Where the divine might project symbols of growth and connection, the simulacrum overlays them with superficial desires and distractions. Archetypal struggles become commodified, reducing profound spiritual tensions to fleeting consumerist impulses. The Volitist understands that to see the world as it truly is, and to reunite with the divine will, the mind must be rewilded, stripped of the simulacrum's toxins. Rewilding the mind. Rewilding the mind is a process of shedding artificial constructs and returning to a state of mental clarity and authentic perception. It is an act of liberation, breaking free from the simulacrum's illusions and reconnecting with the uncorrupted truth of existence. Through rewilding, the Volitist begins to see the projection more clearly. As the simulacrum's pollutants are removed, the external world begins to reflect the internal psyche with greater fidelity. The fractured images become sharper and closer to the divine will's original intent. Reclaim true desire. The simulacrum implants false desires rooted in ego and consumerism. Rewilding reveals the soul's true desires, which are in harmony with the divine. Strengthen the will. A rewilded mind is unburdened by the distraction, allowing the will to focus with clarity and resilience on its journey towards enlightenment with the divine. Practices for rewilding the mind. Digital detox. Reduce exposure to social media, advertising, and other forms of artificial input that reinforce the simulacrum. Nature immersion. Spend time in nature, observing the uncorrupted symbolism and rhythms. Nature reflects the divine with far greater clarity than the artificial constructs of the simulacrum. Symbolic reflection. Engage with symbols that resonate deeply with your internal psyche, bypassing the simulacrum's superficial imagery. Seeing with greater clarity, the alignment of the vision and will. As the mind is rewilded, the Volitist perception of the external world becomes ever more faithful to the divine. The fractured, distorted images of the simulacrum give way to a truer reflection of the internal psyche. The world no longer appears as a chaotic projection of separation, but as a unified field of symbolic resonance, where every interaction, every conflict, every joy aligns with the true divine intent. The conversion of vision and will. With clearer perception comes greater alignment of the will with the divine. As the Volitist purifies their vision, they begin to see the symbolic meaning behind every relationship. The once scattered fragments of the psyche coalesce into coherent, unified force. The Volitist will becomes resilient, no longer swayed by the simulacrum's illusions, focused, directed towards the pursuit of true meaning and alignment, harmonized, flowing naturally with the rhythms of the divine will. From reflection to revelation. The external world, once distorted by the simulacrum, now serves as a luminous guide. Each interaction reveals not only the state of the Volitist's internal psyche, but also the deeper truth of the divine's unfolding narrative. The journey towards alignment becomes one of revelation, where the line between individual will and the divine will begins to blur. Empathy, projection, and the true divine intent. As the Volitist rewilds their mind and purifies their vision, their empathy for others deepens. With a clearer understanding of the fractured psyche, they recognize that others' struggles and actions are projections of the same divine fracture they themselves are healing. This fosters compassion without attachment, an ability to support others on their journey without becoming entangled in the simulacrum's false dynamics. By embodying this clarity, the volitist becomes a beacon of enlightenment, inspiring others to begin their own process of rewilding and reclamation. Practices for embodying alignment. Mirror meditation. Sit quietly and imagine the external world as a reflection of your internal psyche. Ask, what does this reflection reveal about the state of my will? Vision training. Practice seeing beyond the simulacrum by interpreting everyday interactions as symbolic projections. Focus on what these symbols teach about alignment with the divine. Will alignment journaling. At the end of each day, reflect on moments your will felt aligned or misaligned with the divine, and identify the influence of the simulacrum. Conclusion. The ascension of the volitist. As the journey through volitism unfolds, it becomes evident that the path is not one of mere self-improvement or abstract philosophical musings, but a profound odyssey, a reclamation of agency, purpose, and truth. The volitist does not seek to conquer the external world, but to master the inner domain, to harmonize the fractured will with the divine, and to restore clarity to the projection of existence itself. The external world, once perceived as chaotic and fractured, is now understood as a symbolic manifestation of the internal psyche, a canvas upon which the divine paints its intent. Through rewilding the mind, shedding artificial constraints of the simulacrum, and embracing practices and principles outlined in this treatise, the volitist embarks on a transformative process. It is a journey of individuation and of integration, one that transcends suffering and culminates in the alignment with the true divine will. A call to agency. The philosophy of volitism demands action. Understanding is not enough. One must take the principles from this treatise and actively embody them, rewild the mind, reclaim the will, face the shadow with courage and curiosity. The simulacrum will not willingly release its hold. Its illusions will beckon and distract. But the volitist recognizes these temptations as opportunities, each one a reflection of the fractured psyche awaiting integration. The volitist does not shy away from suffering, but sees it as a crucible, a tension that, when embraced and transcended, forges a stronger, purer will. In every challenge lies an invitation to grow, refine, and to ascend. The path to harmony. As the volitist reclaims agency and aligns their will with the divine, they begin to experience a profound harmony. No longer are they at odds with the currents of life. Instead, they move with the rhythm of the cosmos, guided by an unshakable inner clarity. Obstacles no longer appear as insurmountable barriers, but as necessary tensions that lead to synthesis and growth. This harmony is not the absence of struggle, but a dynamic interplay, a dance with the divine. It is a state of flow where the individual will and the divine will become indistinguishable. This is the ultimate goal of volitism, to become not merely a participant in life, but a co-creator, embodying the divine intent with every thought, word, and action. A living philosophy. Volitism is not static. It is not a doctrine to be memorized or a rigid system to be followed. It is a living philosophy, one that evolves as the volitist evolves. Each individual's journey adds to the tapestry of volitism, enriching it with new insights and perspectives. It is a collaborative effort, a shared vision that grows and adapts to the needs of those who walk the path. Let this treatise be your guide, but not your limitation. Question it, test it, refine it. For in doing so, you contribute to the very essence of volitism, the perpetual pursuit of truth, alignment, and transcendence. A final reflection. The path of the volitist is not an easy one. It requires courage, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to truth. But it is also a path of profound fulfillment, offering the promise of a life lived in harmony with the divine. As you stand at the threshold of this journey, Ask yourself, are you ready to confront the shadows within and see the world as a mirror of your psyche? Are you prepared to rewild your mind, cast off illusions of the simulacrum, and embrace unfiltered truth and existence? Are you willing to reclaim your will and align it with the divine, becoming a force of creation, clarity, and compassion in the world? If the answer is yes, then the journey has already begun. Step forward with purpose, for the divine awaits, not in some distant heaven, but within you. Fractured perhaps, but yearning to be whole. The path is yours to walk, the will yours to reclaim, and the divine yours to embody. This is the way of the Volutist. Volitional descent and reclamation. If you've made it this far, congratulations. We now introduce you to a uniquely Volutist practice developed by myself and Aileron. In theory, and for myself in practice, it has proved invaluable for accessing the recesses of the mind. Unique to Volutism, but based off the principles of EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and REM sleep, REM, rapid eye movement, sleep, I will now introduce you to this new proprietary and experimental Volutist practice. VDR is a method for reclaiming volitional energy hijacked by unresolved subconscious forces. It is not mere introspection, but a systematic descent into the deep psyche, where fragmented will is trapped in feedback loops of emotion, memory, and archetypal fixation. By retrieving these lost aspects, the practitioner reintegrates their will, restoring volitional mastery. This method is structured as a guided descent through layers of the mind, locating the trapped will, and performing a reclamation directive to reintegrate it. Foundational preparation and ritualistic anchoring. Setting the stage, anchoring into the divine will. Before beginning the descent, the practitioner must establish the foundation. 1. The sacred space. Choose a quiet location, free from distractions. Sit on the ground, dignified posture, spine erect, shoulders back but relaxed. Once again, we imagine a golden thread extending from the crown of your head, tethering you to the divine will, a direct connection to the source of unbroken volition. Parasympathetic breathwork, the physiological gait. To quiet the nervous system, engage in a 4-6-8 breath cycle. Inhale through the nose for 4 seconds, filling the lower lungs. Hold the breath for 6 seconds, feeling the stillness. Exhale through pursed lips for 8 seconds, fully releasing the tension. Repeat 6 cycles, allowing the mind to enter a calm, lucid state. The triangular flame, the liminal eye. Light 3 candles, arranging them in a triangle before you. Relax the eyes into liminality, neither fully open nor shut, neither active nor passive. Allow the subconscious to guide your gaze, moving freely between candles without conscious control. As the eyes move, repeat the following affirmation. I descend with clarity. I descend with strength. I descend to reclaim my will. This creates a physiological entrainment effect, priming the mind for deep retrieval work. The descent, locating the fragment. Every hijacked volitional fragment exists in a loop, an unresolved cycle of thought, emotion, or belief. This loop is sustained by somatic anchor, a physical sensation or tension pattern, emotional charge, the affective energy keeping it active, the affective energy keeping it active, narrative construct, the conscious or subconscious story reinforcing it, and temporal fixation, the past event or events it remains trapped in. Practical steps. The trigger invocation. Begin by identifying a situation that provokes a loss of volition: hesitation, compulsion, avoidance, fixation. Somatic mapping. Locate where it manifests in the body: tightness in the chest, tension in the jaw, sinking in the gut, etc. Emotion identification. Define the core affective charge: shame, guilt, rage, fear, grief. Loop recognition. Observe the narrative or belief structure sustaining it. Temporal descent. Follow the thread to its earliest known occurrence, seeking its root imprint. The limbo state. Entering the fragment's domain. The fragment of will is locked in a frozen cycle, perceiving reality through its own distortions. It operates as a sub-personality, reliving the moment as if it were still real. At this stage, the practitioner enters a heightened state of receptivity, not to re-experience pain, but to witness the trapped fragment directly. Practical steps. The observer's stance. Shift from "I am reliving this" to "I am witnessing this fragment." 2. Archetypal identification. What persona is this fragment embodying? The shamed child, the exile, the martyr, the failure, the betrayed? 3. Loop disruption. What falsehood sustains its loop? Identify its primary distortion. Example: am I unworthy? Am I powerless? Will I always be abandoned? 4. Revelation threshold. What truth does this fragment refuse to see? Reclamation, the will's return. Once the fragment is exposed, it must be reclaimed. This is done through the reclamation directive, a spoken decree that collapses the loop and retrieves the will. Practical steps. 1. Volitional command. Speak directly to the fragment. This moment is no longer real. You are no longer bound to it. 2. Truth confrontation. Reveal the hidden reality the fragment refused. You are not powerless. You were never truly abandoned. You are whole. 3. Will reintegration. Pull the fragment back into the self. I reclaim this part of my will. I call it back into my being. 4. Somatic affirmation. Feel the shift in the body sensation, confirming the release. Sometimes the shoulders will drop, the jaw will drop and loosen, and you will feel a great feeling of tension release. The sealing. Integration into the whole. The final step cements the reclaimed will within the practitioner's totality. Practical steps. 1. The breath seal. Take 3 slow breaths, visualizing the fragment merging back into the center of the will. 2. Symbolic act. Perform a deliberate action symbolizing reclamation, clenching the fist, writing the final truth, stepping forward. 3. Final declaration. Speak aloud. This will is mine. It is restored. Remember, we create what we speak. Closing notes. The eye as the gateway to reclamation. The human eye is a black hole, a singularity where perception and reality collapse into unity, where light meets darkness and the material meets the spiritual. It is the liminal threshold between worlds, the microcosmic order of the vast cosmic machinery. Just as a black hole bends space-time, drawing all within its event horizon, so too does the eye bend perception, shaping the world as it's received by consciousness. In VDR, the act of moving the eyes between the 3 candles is more than a mere focus exercise. It is the mechanism by which the practitioner accesses the deepest layers of the subconscious. This movement is not random. It is guided by the silent hand of the will, a process mirroring the way the mind naturally accesses memory and integrates meaning. As the practitioner's vision traverses the triangular arrangement, they are performing a cosmic ritual in microcosm. The candlelight enters the eye, the black hole of perception, carrying with it the symbolic illumination of hidden truths. The eye absorbs the light, just as the subconscious absorbs experience, distilling it into understanding. The movement between the flames mimics shifting of awareness between past, present, and future, allowing the will to weave through temporal layers and retrieve what is lost. By gazing into these three burning points, the practitioner synchronizes the macrocosmic spiritual divine with the microcosmic personal and physical. The light enters the abyss of the self, illuminating shadows, dissolving illusions, and harmonizing fractured volition. Thus, the eye is not merely an observer in this process. It is the active medium of transmutation. In this ritual, the practitioner is not only reclaiming the will, but also aligning their sight with true vision, restoring the sovereign gaze that perceives beyond illusion and the depths of reality itself. VDR is not therapy. It is a highly targeted method for reclaiming volitional power. It requires precise self-awareness, courage, and commitment to break deep-rooted loops. Over time, repeated practice erodes subconscious hijacking, restoring true autonomy. Book 2, Volitism on Resilience, The Forge of the Will. Chapter 1, The Immutable Will, Endurance as a Divine Mandate. James Stockdale. A man is not defeated when he is beaten. He is defeated when he accepts defeat. The story of James Stockdale is not just one of survival, but of resilience forged in the crucible of suffering. His ordeal reveals a fundamental truth. While the body may be shackled, tormented, and broken, the will remains untouchable when aligned with the divine. Volitism asserts that the will is not merely an internal faculty, but the unbreakable conduit between the individual and the eternal, a force that transcends the limitations of the flesh and the illusions of the material world. Stockdale's defiance against his captors, his refusal to submit, and his ability to transform suffering into a battlefield for the mind serve as a living testament to the core principle of volitism. Resilience is not a reaction, but a state of being. It is not something one simply has, but rather a mode of existence one must cultivate, an alignment with the divine will that renders the self unshakable. This chapter seeks to integrate the principles of unyielding endurance into the Volitist framework, establishing resilience not just as a psychological tool, but as a spiritual imperative, a divine mandate that we, agents of the eternal will, must embody. The hierarchy of control, recognizing the immutable core. A fundamental misalignment of perception occurs when one identifies too closely with the body. The flesh is a temporary vessel, subject to the whims of nature, genetics, and external forces. It acts independently of our conscious intent, performing thousands of processes we do not control. It can be injured, grow sick, and eventually decay. To place one's identity solely in the body is to build a fortress upon shifting sands. Yet within us exists something untouchable. The mind and will exist beyond the domain of physical law. They are not bound by material limitations, nor can they be conquered by external force unless willingly surrendered. While pain, illness, and confinement may afflict the body, the will remains sovereign, a pillar that stands unshaken amidst the storm. Volitism asserts that true strength is not found in mere physicality, but in the unwavering refusal to surrender the mind and will, for in them resides the fragment of the divine. To endure is not to passively suffer, but to actively transmute adversity into strength. The immutable core of the volitist. The body is a vessel, subject to decay, harm, and external force. It is not you, only the form through which you operate. The mind is a battlefield. The enemy may seek to implant doubt, despair, and submission, but only you can decide what takes root. The will is divine. It is the eternal link to the absolute, and so long as it remains aligned with the divine will, it is untouchable. It is only when one forgets this hierarchy, when one mistakes bodily suffering for total defeat, that the will is lost. But for those who remember, there is no force in existence capable of breaking them. Endurance as a mode of being. James Stockdale did not merely survive his captivity. He weaponized suffering to become stronger. He refused to let pain, isolation, or despair sever him from his will. In this, he exemplified the volutist approach to endurance. Endurance is a mindset, the reframing of suffering. If you are suffering, it is because that God deems you strong enough to bear it. Endurance is not merely a reaction to suffering. It is a chosen stance, a conscious alignment with the unshakable will. A volutist does not passively endure hardship, but actively reframes it. Pain is a test, an opportunity to prove one's fortitude. Isolation is a sanctuary, a chance to cultivate absolute self-reliance. Adversity is a forge, shaping the self into something greater. Stockdale did not perceive captivity as a meaningless torment. He recognized it as a proving ground for his will, where his enemies held no power unless he granted it. Volutism asserts that one must not wait for suffering to end, but rather meet it as a challenger and reshape it into a source of strength. Reality is what you accept, the primacy of perspective. The enemy controlled my body, but my mind and will were untouchable. The external world does not dictate one's reality. Perception does. The moment one accepts defeat, suffering, or hopelessness as absolute truths, they become real. But for those who refuse to accept conditions as final, reality bends before the unyielding will. A prisoner who believes himself free cannot be broken. A man subjected to pain who refuses to grant it meaning renders it powerless. A warrior who sees death only as a transition fights without fear. Volutism teaches that one must never accept external circumstances as defining factors of existence. To claim sovereignty over one's perception is to claim sovereignty over reality itself. True power lies in the ability to suffer without breaking. The moment you accept suffering as fuel, you transcend it. Weak men fear pain because they see it as an affliction. The volutist embraces it as an ally. Those who avoid suffering at all costs remain weak and fragile. Those who confront it learn to reshape it into power. Those who transcend it become untouchable. Stockdale's survival was not built on blind hope. It was forged through active engagement with suffering. He did not merely endure pain. He met it, studied it, and refused to let it dictate his identity. This is the essence of the volutist approach to hardship. Pain is an offering, and those who accept it become greater than they were before. Pain is temporary. Honor is forever. To submit is to lose the self. To endure is to remain whole. There is no greater loss than the surrender of the will. A man who yields to suffering loses not only the battle, but himself. A man who stands unbroken, even unto death, remains eternal. Stockdale chose suffering over submission because he understood that physical pain passes, but the integrity of one's will is immortal. A volutist must make the same choice. To resist, even when resistance seems futile. To endure, even when the body begs to break. To uphold the will, for it is the only true possession one has. To suffer for a cause greater than oneself is not a burden. It is the highest form of alignment with the divine will. And in that, the volutist becomes indestructible. Conclusion: the unyielding volutist. Stockdale's story is not just one of survival. It is a blueprint for the reclamation of the immutable will. To suffer and endure without breaking is not merely a skill. It is the essence of volitional mastery. And this book integrates his lessons and the lessons of other figures we will encounter into the very core of volutism, establishing that the body is temporary, the will is eternal. Reality is what you accept. Never yield to false narratives. Suffering is power. Those who embrace it transcend it. Pain is fleeting. Honor is forever. A volitist is not one who merely withstands hardship. A volitist is one who transforms adversity into will, suffering into strength, and captivity into victory. The body may fall, but the will is eternal. Thus, let it be written in the canon of volitism, there is no suffering that cannot be transmuted into power, no hardship that can shatter the immutable will. Chapter 2. Musashi is the ultimate embodiment of self-mastery through relentless will. His story isn't just one of skill, but of total mental, physical, and strategic dominance. A man who honed himself into an unstoppable force. Musashi, the indomitable swordsman. Early life and the birth of an unyielding will. Musashi's origins are shrouded in both legend and history. Born in 1584, he was raised in an era of samurai warfare. By the age of 13, he fought and killed a trained samurai in single combat. This was not luck. This was the emergence of a force of will so strong that it would shape his entire life. Unlike many samurai who followed rigid schools of swordsmanship, Musashi was an outsider, a ronin who rejected traditional dogma. He forged his own path, defining mastery on his own terms. The unbreakable warrior, 61 duels, 61 victories. Musashi's true legend was carved through his duels. Across 61 battles, he was never defeated. His most famous duel against Sasaki Kojiro is a masterclass in volition. Kojiro was the greatest swordsman of his time, wielding a longer blade with a superior reach. Musashi arrived late on purpose, psychologically unbalancing his opponent before the fight even began. Instead of traditional katana, Musashi carved a wooden sword from an oar and still killed Kojiro with one strike. This wasn't just swordsmanship. This was a total control of the self and situation, the will bending reality in Musashi's favor. The philosophy of an unyielding mind. Musashi's later years were devoted to refining his mind as much as his blade. He wrote the Book of Five Rings, which wasn't just about fighting. It was about mastering all things through discipline and adaptability. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the sword. Ego is the enemy of mastery. True will is externalized into action, not self-obsession. You must understand that there is no more than one path to the top of the mountain. The will is not bound to one method. True mastery is adaptability. Do nothing that is of no use. Volitional efficiency. Eliminate wasteful action, thought, and emotion. Musashi's ultimate test. Mastery beyond combat. In his final years, Musashi lived in seclusion, meditating, writing, and refining his philosophy. He died sitting in the Zen posture of meditation, as if death itself was simply another moment to master. His life was not just about fighting. It was a testament to volitional mastery in all aspects of existence. Lessons in will, volitist practice from Musashi. 1. Train every day with ruthless discipline. Mastery is not a moment, it is a lifetime. 2. Master multiple disciplines. The will must be adaptable. Stagnation is the enemy. 3. Remove all excesses, physical, mental, and emotional. True will is pure, focused energy. 4. Control the battlefield before the battle begins. Reality bends to those who impose their will upon it. 5. Accept death and fear nothing. Fear of loss, pain, or failure weakens the will. Face all things head on. Musashi was the embodiment of volitional mastery, unyielding, unstoppable, a pure force of will, a force of pure will and nature made of flesh. Musashi and the fusion of microcosm and macrocosm. Musashi's greatness was not merely in his physical prowess, but his ability to perceive reality as a unified whole, aligning his eternal will with the greater forces of existence. Unlike other samurai who followed rigid traditions, Musashi understood that true mastery was not about technique alone. It was about becoming one with the way itself. The void and the way, Musashi's esoteric understanding. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi ends with the mysterious Book of the Void, where he speaks of transcending duality. By knowing things that exist, you can know which does not. When your spirit is not in the least clouded, when the clouds of bewilderment clear away, there is the true void. Here, Musashi is describing absolute clarity of perception, a state where one is no longer bound by illusion, hesitation, or ego. This empty mind, Mushin, allows him to move without obstruction, reacting to battle as if he were nature itself. This is the volutist ideal. When one masters the inner realm, thought, fear, hesitation, desire, the outer world ceases to resist them. The external world becomes an extension of their will. Mastery of self equals mastery of the blade equals mastery of the universe. Musashi's swordplay was an extension of his mind. His mind was an extension of the universe. He reversed the light inward, understanding that battle was not won through aggression, but through absolute presence. He never struck first. He let his opponent reveal themselves, allowing their own flaws to defeat them. He adapted instantly. He did not follow rigid patterns, but flowed like water, aligning himself with the forces of nature rather than resisting them. He moved beyond swordsmanship, becoming an artist, a strategist, a poet. His will was not confined to combat, but permeated all existence. This is the essence of volutist alignment. Musashi did not seek to control reality through brute force. Instead, he harmonized with it while imposing his will upon it, fusing self-determination with the natural flow of existence. Musashi's death, transcending form, returning to the void. Musashi's death was not one of sickness, nor of despair. At the end of his life, he sat in the lotus position, sword beside him, eyes closed, and simply left this world as he had lived, fully in control, fully present, fully aligned. He did not resist death nor fear it. He had already transcended form. He had become the void itself, a perfect fusion of will and the way. Lessons in will. 1. Empty the mind. Fill the universe. The more you cling to thoughts, doubts, and fears, the more they obstruct you. True volition is clarity, a mind free from hesitation. 2. Flow with the world. The world is not an enemy to be conquered, but a force to be mastered. Adapt, adjust, and align. 3. Train all things, become all things. Musashi mastered swords, painting, poetry, and strategy. Mastery is not singular, it is total. 4. Die as you lived, unbroken, unyielding, aligned. When the end comes, fear nothing. If you have lived with an indomitable will, death is simply another step on the path. Final thoughts. Musashi as an archetype of the volutist warrior. Musashi was more than a warrior. He was a living embodiment of volitional mastery. He did not simply defeat opponents. He saw through reality itself. He trained his inner self until it was as refined as his sword, and in doing so, he became something greater. A force of nature, an entity of pure will moving through the world. Musashi shows us that mastering the microcosm, inner world, is not separate from mastering the macrocosm, outer world. They are the same. Those who conquer themselves conquer the universe. Musashi did not fight the world. He became it. Chapter 3. Through Fire and Shadow. Frankl and the Volutist Forge of the Will. The Crucible of Suffering. Before Viktor Frankl became a towering figure in existential psychology, he was a young Austrian psychiatrist navigating a world on the brink of collapse. Born in 1905, he developed an early fascination with the meaning of human resilience, themes that would later define both his philosophy and his survival. But it was in the concentration camps, including Auschwitz, where Frankl's theories were not just tested, but forged in suffering. Stripped of his profession, possessions, and even his family, he faced the rawest confrontation with the human condition. In Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl describes moments that would break most minds. Watching prisoners collapse from exhaustion, enduring brutal labor, suffering the loss of loved ones without time to grieve. Yet in the abyss of suffering, he made a choice to see himself as the master of his own inner world, no matter how broken the external one became. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This act of volitional defiance, choosing how to suffer rather than being passively destroyed by it, is the foundation of both Frankl's philosophy and volitism itself. Unlike many who surrendered to despair, Frankl reframed suffering as a space where one could assert their will. This was not mere endurance, it was an active self-determination in the face of oblivion. The reclaimed will. Frankl's ability to endure was not just psychological, it was volitional mastery in action. While others collapsed under the weight of meaninglessness, he transformed his suffering into a vehicle for self-transcendence. He found purpose in comforting fellow prisoners, offering them words of encouragement. He clung to the imagined presence of his wife, proving that love and meaning could exist even in absence. He envisioned himself standing before an audience, lecturing on the psychology of suffering, actively constructing a future beyond the camps. Each of these acts was a direct assertion of will over the simulacrum of suffering. Where the web of simulacra and modernity lulls people into passive despair through excess comfort, the camps forced Frankl to the opposite extreme, a confrontation with suffering so absolute that he had no choice but to actively forge meaning or be obliterated by nihilism. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. This is why this deeply volitional act of defining meaning became the core of his survival. He was not waiting for meaning to arrive. He was generating it through the sheer force of will. Logotherapy and volitism, the will beyond meaning. Frankl's logotherapy argues that the primary human drive is not pleasure, Freud, for example, or power, Adler, for example, but meaning. By helping patients find purpose, he believed they could transcend suffering. Volitism, however, takes this further. Meaning is not just something we can discover, it is something we can create. Where logotherapy emphasizes finding purpose, volitism demands forging it, consciously shaping it as an act of will. Key synthesis of logotherapy and volitism. 1. From passive discovery to active construction. Logotherapy, meaning is discovered through reflection and action. Volitism, meaning is deliberately constructed through volitional intent, even in defiance of circumstances. 2. Beyond survival, meaning as a weapon of will. Frankl used meaning to endure suffering. Volitism weaponizes meaning not just for endurance, but for expansion, to break beyond limits, not just withstand them. 3. The praxis of meaning forging. Reframing suffering as a challenge to overcome rather than something to endure, using symbolic resonance to embed meaning into daily rituals and choices, developing a personal mythology that makes suffering part of the epic volitional narrative rather than an arbitrary burden. Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. This is where volitism refines logotherapy. Instead of merely finding meaning in suffering, we bend suffering to our will and alchemize it into a force for spiritual transformation. Frankl taught us to endure. Volitism teaches us to transcend. Conclusion: the forge of the will. Frankl's journey through fire and shadow is more than just a testament to human resilience. It is an instruction manual for the volitist path. He proved that suffering is not just an obstacle, but a crucible, a forge in which the will can be reforged into something unbreakable. But where Frankl stopped at survival through meaning, volitism demands something greater, not just to endure suffering, but to spiritually transcend. Chapter 4. Safan Hassan. the unyielding will. Safan Hassan's story does not begin on the Olympic stage, nor on the track, nor even in the world of athletics. It begins in adversity, in displacement, in the unfamiliar. Born in Ethiopia, she fled to the Netherlands as a refugee at the age of 15, alone in a world that had already thrown her into uncertainty. Many might have crumbled under the weight of such an uprooted existence, but Hassan did not. Instead, she ran. Her rise in athletics was not a story of privilege, nor was it one of gradual, calculated progression. It was the manifestation of an iron will, one that could not be dictated by circumstance. She was not merely a talented runner. She was an athlete who defied every conventional limitation imposed by the body, mind, and the world. Hassan would go on to accomplish what no other runner, man or woman, had ever done. At the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, she sought to win the 1500, 5000, and 10,000 meter, an impossible triple that required mastery of speed, endurance, and sheer unrelenting resolve. No one had dared to attempt it before. No one had ever won Olympic medals across these distances in a single games, but Hassan did. In her opening heat to the 1500 meter, she fell, tripped by another runner. The race should have been over. The body, the mind, both would tell any rational competitor that it was time to give up, to conserve energy for the next race. But Hassan did not yield. She got up, chased down the entire field, and won. This was not merely a display of skill or fitness. It was the will in its purest form, unyielding, absolute, refusing to acknowledge limitation. She would go on to win gold in the 5,000 meter, gold in the 10,000 meter, and bronze in the 1,500 meter, securing her place as one of the greatest athletes in history. In Paris 2024, she would go on to do the unimaginable, securing another gold medal, this time in the marathon, demonstrating her uncanny ability to dominate a wide range of running disciplines from lower middle distance to upper long distance. Not only that, she picked up 2 more medals in 2024, adding bronze medals to her collection at 5,000 and 10,000 meters, making her possibly the greatest athlete in history. But her story is not just one of records. It is a lesson in the transcendence of the will. Transcending mind and body. Distance running is not just a sport. It is the arena where the fundamental battle of existence plays out. The body reaches a point where it begs for rest. The muscles burn, the lungs strain, the heart pounds. The body, on its own, will always demand surrender. But then, even the mind joins in. It rationalizes stopping, whispering that enough has been done. There is nothing left to prove. This is where most people stop. But there is something deeper, something beyond body and mind. The will, proving its transcendental primacy even over the mind. Recognizing and actualizing its true purpose is a link, a conduit to the divine, accessing unlimited potential. Hassan spoke about reaching this state, a place where pain and fatigue become irrelevant, where she is no longer listening to the body or the mind, but something greater. This is the threshold where true volitional mastery emerges. In these moments, the individual ceases to merely be a person running. They become a conduit for the divine. This is why running has long been linked to spirituality. The famed runner's high, a trance-like state experienced in prolonged endurance. It's not merely chemical. It is the moment when the will fully overrides the limitations of the flesh and thought. It is the realization that there is no difference between the one who runs and the act of running itself. It is the ultimate flow state. Hassan embodies this realization. In her races, she does not merely push past pain. She enters a realm where pain is no longer relevant. She does not merely push past exhaustion. She becomes something beyond exhaustion, becoming a conduit for the divine. The will, when fully harnessed, is not just the force that allows us to persist. It is the bridge between the self and something greater. In volitism, this is the key to transcending the web of simulacra, to stepping beyond the conditioned mind and reclaiming our direct connection to the divine will. Hassan's running is not just an act of athleticism. It is a manifestation of the divine in motion, a demonstration that when the will is unshackled from limitations, It channels something far greater than the individual, a gestalt, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When she fell in the 1500 meter and rose again to win, she was not just running a race. She was embodying a truth. The will does not break. The will does not stop. The will is absolute. And in this, she becomes a model not just for athletes, but for all those who seek to reclaim their volitional mastery. To run as Hassan runs is to live as the Volitist lives, unyielding, transcendent, and wholly attuned to the divine will. Chapter 5. The Unyielding Will. Terry Fox and Rick Hansen. I just wish people would try to realize that anything is possible if you try. Dreams are made possible if you try. Terry Fox. There is no finish line. Rick Hansen. The shattered body, the unbroken will. Two men, two bodies broken by fate. Two spirits that refuse to kneel. Terry Fox was 18 when osteosarcoma claimed his right leg. The doctors told him he would never run again. Rick Hansen was 15 when a car accident severed his spinal cord. They told him he would never walk again. The world had spoken. Their lives would be small, confined by their injuries. They refused to listen. In a world where simulacrum teaches passivity, where most people accept their imposed limits, these men saw through the illusion. They recognized that the body is only a vessel. The will is what commands it. And when that will is tethered to something greater, even broken and shattered flesh cannot stand in its way. The decision to defy fate. Pain is a great equalizer. It makes most men retreat. But for those who have touched the divine will, it becomes fuel. Terry Fox, in the sterile white halls of the cancer ward, watched children suffer and decided he would run across Canada to raise money for research. Not a short run, not a sprint. He would run a marathon a day, every day, on a prosthetic leg. Rick Hansen, after years of rehab, refused to see his wheelchair as a prison. Instead, he saw it as a chariot. He would push himself, not just through his hometown, not just through Canada, but across the world, proving that movement, life itself, was still his to command. Both men did not just endure their hardships, they weaponized them. They transformed suffering into action. They moved forward, step by agonizing step, because stopping was never an option. The impossible undertaking. Terry Fox ran for 143 days, covering 5,373 kilometers, essentially a marathon every single day, on one leg. Rick Hansen wheeled himself over 40,000 kilometers, crossing 34 countries, climbing mountains, pushing through deserts. Every mile was a war. Terry's prosthetic leg was not built for running. Every step sent jarring shocks through his bones. The pain was constant, yet he kept going. Rick's journey was a trial of endurance. Roads are not made for wheelchairs. Hills that seemed insurmountable. The strain on his arms, the exhaustion, the doubts. He kept pushing. But it was not just stubbornness that drove them. It was something deeper, something few men will ever touch. Alignment with a will beyond themselves. Terry spoke often of an unseen force, a drive greater than his own. He did not run for himself. He ran for something far beyond him. Rick, too, saw his mission as a cause, not just a feat of endurance. They did not act as individuals, but as vessels of something higher. And that is why they succeeded where others would have faltered. The breaking point. Every journey of the reclaimer has its moments of reckoning. The point where the body screams enough, the moment when continuing is madness. For Terry, it came when the cancer returned. His lungs were failing, yet he tried to keep running. He had to be forced to stop. Even in his hospital bed, he still wanted to move forward. For Rick, it was the moments of despair, the times when his body begged for rest, when every push forward was a war against gravity. Yet he did not stop, because stopping would mean surrender. Their suffering was not meaningless. It was the crucible in which their will was aligned and purified. The legacy of the indomitable. Terry Fox never crossed the finish line, but his journey was not in vain. His legacy raised over $1 billion for cancer research, a fire that still burns today. While his body succumbed to the battle with cancer, his will won the war. Rick Hansen completed his Man in Motion tour, redefining what was possible for people with disabilities, proving to the world that limits exist only in the mind. They rewrote reality itself. Volatus principles embodied. 1. The transcendence of the body. The will, when properly aligned, overrides physical limitations. The body flows where the will commands. 2. Purpose-driven suffering. Suffering without meaning is torment. Suffering tethered to a higher cause is transformation. 3. Endurance beyond reason. Comfort is a pacifier. Pain is a forge. The reclaimer must learn to push beyond what the mind believes is possible. 4. Faith in the higher will. Those who move in alignment with something greater than themselves can achieve the impossible. The challenge to the reclaimer. Terry Fox and Rick Hansen looked at the chains imposed upon them and shattered them. They refused to be confined by fate. What chains still bind you? What limits have been placed upon you by the world, by your mind, by the web of simulacra? Break them. Move forward. The divine will does not bow to circumstance. Neither should you. Chapter 6. The Endurer and the Conqueror of Limits. The wind howled across the frozen abyss, a relentless force stripping flesh of warmth and thought of certainty. Before them stretched the unknown, a vast, merciless expanse where survival bowed only to those who imposed their will upon it. Two figures stood at the threshold of this oblivion, their breaths thick with frost, their gazes fixed upon the infinite. One was the Endurer, a man who bent but never broke. He had known the long night of despair, the weight of frost-bitten limbs, the agony of leading men through starvation and icebound desolation. He had stood at the precipice of death and whispered, "Not yet." The other was the Conqueror of Limits, a man who did not merely resist suffering, but sought it out. His victories were not mere survival, but in defiance of thresholds. He had tested the body's breaking point and forced it beyond. He had rewritten what men believed possible. Between them stood a great and terrible void, the trial of ice. They moved forward, step by step, forging their path through the frozen wasteland. The Endurer walked with measured patience, every action deliberate, every movement conserving energy. He had led men through hell and learned that survival was not about brute force but calculated persistence. A man is not judged by how far he goes, but by what he can bear without breaking, he said. The will is not in conquering the land, but in outlasting it. The Conqueror scoffed. Outlasting is submission disguised as resilience. If all you do is endure, you are the ice, unchanging, frozen in place. The will is proven in force, in conquest. I do not endure the ice, I make it kneel. He pressed forward, forging without hesitation, his body a weapon honed against the elements. Where the Endurer moved with patience, the Conqueror of Limits moved with sheer, violent intent. But the ice does not care for philosophy. The storm swallowed the horizon. The wind became a wall, the cold living thing that stripped reason from the mind and sensation from the flesh. In its wake, only the will remained. The abyss of the mind. In the storm, the world ceased to exist. There was only the howling void, the suffocating weight of nothingness pressing against the soul. Here lay the parallel to the mind, the true battleground. The mind, like the frozen unknown, was treacherous and without mercy. Those who wandered blindly were consumed. Those who fought without wisdom found themselves lost. The Conqueror pushed forward, every fiber of his being resisting the force of nature. He raged against it, refusing to kneel, until exhaustion clawed at his bones. The Endurer knelt, not in surrender, but in strategy. He anchored himself, conserving his fire. He had faced storms before. He knew they passed. The mind breaks when not in the gale, but in the unprepared soul, he whispered. But the Conqueror would not yield. He had conquered limits before. This would be no different. Yet his strength, his weapon, was blunted in the face of the abyss. The storm does not acknowledge defiance. For the first time, he hesitated. Integration, the reclamation of the will. It was here, at the edge of collapse, that understanding dawned. The two were not adversaries, but halves of the same whole. To endure without conquest was stagnation. To conquer without endurance was destruction. The will required both. The endurer reached into his depths and found the fire of the conqueror. He rose, stepped forward, not with patience alone, but with intent. The conqueror stilled his reckless charge. Adopting the patience of the endurer, he pressed forward not through force alone, but through measured resilience. Together, they emerged from the storm. The path forward. Volitional mastery is neither passive endurance nor blind conquest, but the synthesis of both. The mind must be endured when it rages against itself, when despair whispers of surrender, but it must also be conquered, pushed beyond its known limits, forced to bow to the true will. The endurer survives the void. The conqueror of limits refuses to accept it. But only together do they traverse it. And so must we. Chapter 7. The Defiant Flame and the Unbroken Oath. The world is a prison for the unawakened will. It binds with laws unwritten, chains unseen, and walls so vast they are mistaken for the horizon itself. To break free is to risk annihilation, to step beyond what is permitted and declare oneself sovereign. Few dare, fewer still succeed. And yet, throughout history, there have been those who refused to kneel, who stood in open defiance against the forces that sought to own them. Some fought in the shadows, wielding fire against the monolith of control. Others stood upon the scaffold, their bodies broken, but their spirits unbowed. Among these, two figures rise. One, a whisper of rebellion in the dark. The other, a war cry that shakes the heavens. The kindling of rebellion. The cell was damp, the air thick with rot. Shackled to the walls, his body a ruin of pain, the prisoner did not tremble. He had been caught, betrayed, dragged before his captors like an animal. But he had not broken. Guy Fawkes had failed, and yet in failure the fire remained. What was this all for? The torturer sneered, pressing ink and paper before him. Write your confession, sign your name, submit. His body screamed for relief. His hands, shattered by the rack, could barely hold the quill. And yet, through the agony, he smiled. They did not understand. Submission is an illusion. They could take his flesh, but not his will. He had not fought for the success of a single act. He had fought because resistance is an end in and of itself. The flame of defiance does not die with the man. It is passed on, igniting others. The simulacrum could crush him, but it could not control him. With his final strength, he scrawled a name. Not his own, but a shadow of it. A ghost, a refusal, a reminder. Then, when they laid him in the gallows, he did not let them claim even a spectacle of his death. He leapt from the scaffold, snapping his own neck before the executioner could touch him. The simulacrum demands submission, but the defiant flame chooses its own fate. The war cry of sovereignty. The battlefield was silent, the banners hanging limp in the morning air. The man stood alone, chains around his wrists, the weight of empire pressing upon his shoulders. Kneel, they commanded, confess treason and beg for mercy. William Wallace had no mercy to beg for. He had fought, not for a throne, not for land, nor for the favor of the kings. He had fought because no man has the right to own another. They tore him apart. First they stripped him of his armor, then they tore at his flesh, drawing out his death, waiting for him to scream, to beg, to weep, to acknowledge that the crown was greater than the will. But the will was not made of flesh. He did not cry out. He did not submit. And when the moment came, when the last of his strength was slipping away, he forced air into his lungs and roared a single word: freedom. The simulacrum demands obedience, but the unbroken oath defies, even in death. The final truth of volitional liberation. The world will always seek to shackle the will. It will tempt with comfort, coerce with fear, and crush with force. It will whisper that submission is survival, that resistance is futile, that sovereignty is impossible. But the defiant flame knows it is better to burn than to be owned. And the unbroken oath knows to die unbowed is to live free. This is the final truth of volitional liberation. First, the inner rebellion must begin, the quiet, unyielding fire that refuses to be subdued. Then, the open defiance must rise, the full declaration of sovereignty, even at the cost of everything. To awaken is to refuse the chains. To reclaim the will is to declare war on the simulacrum. And to be free is to choose death over submission, not in body, but in spirit. Let them chain the flesh. The will kneels to none. Book 3. The Web of Simulacra as an Entropic Cognitive Field. The Runaway Frame Problem and the Expansion of Cognitive Entropy. The web of simulacra is not just a social or cultural construct, but an ontological field, a recursive expansion of self-referential frames that dissolve volitional clarity. Like an unchecked frame problem, the web metastasizes, dragging perception further into an entropic vortex where salience becomes arbitrary and will erodes under an excess of false choices. This is the mental fractalization of reality, where each layer of mediation adds complexity but removes direct experience. The self-assembling maze. The web of simulacra is like a self-generating labyrinth. Every attempt to map it creates more complexity rather than revealing an exit. This is why rational deconstruction alone cannot liberate an individual from the simulacrum. Something more fundamental, an act of volitional negentropy, is required. We'll be using negentropy to basically as a stand-in for the word negative entropy, reversing of entropy. The second law of thermodynamics and the descent into simulacrum. Just as physical systems trend towards higher entropy, so too does the cognitive field when left unchecked. The web of simulacra is the mental equivalent of heat death, a world where everything is information but nothing is meaningful. The simulacrum is not merely an illusion. It is an inevitable entropic drift in cognition resulting from undisciplined attention and fragmented volition. Cognitive heat death. If entropy is disorder, then cognitive entropy is the dissolution of will's ability to distinguish, prioritize, and act with sovereignty. Just as biological life resists thermodynamic entropy by maintaining order, will must resist cognitive entropy by reconstructing perception. Negentropy as the ordering principle of will. Negentropy is the process of reintroducing volitional structure into cognition, reversing the entropic collapse of the simulacrum. The individual becomes the ordering force, applying selective constraints to perception rather than passively absorbing external frames. Negentropy is not about limiting perception, but about reclaiming control over what is salient. The sword of discernment. Like the sword of Manjushri, the will must cut away the unnecessary, honing perception into an active force rather than a passive receiver. The path forward is not through accumulation, but through distillation, unburdening perception from the unnecessary, the trivial, and the imposed. Chapter 2. Restructuring the mind against entropic drift. Cognitive negentropy, shifting perception towards meaningful patterns. Perception is not passive reception. It is an active construction of reality. The web of simulacra hijacks salience, filling perception with arbitrary, fragmented, and externally imposed frames. To reclaim will, one must restructure perception, shifting from passive absorption of external frames to active recognition of meaningful patterns. This is done through volitional negentropy, where cognition is trained to recognize and prioritize symbolic significance over noise. The salience compass. Imagine a compass that always points towards meaning, depth, and personal sovereignty. This compass already exists. It is the will, but it has been buried under cognitive entropy. The practice of negentropic perception is about realigning this compass so it orients perception towards what is truly meaningful rather than the arbitrary. The two pillars of cognitive negentropy. Symbolic resonance, tuning perception into meaning. The mind is inherently symbolic. It processes reality not as raw data, but as patterns of significance. Symbolic resonance is the practice of amplifying what is meaningful while dampening noise, attuning perception to archetypal, mythic, and deeply personal symbols that align with the divine will. How it works. Instead of trying to process everything, one must train the mind to respond only to signals that generate deep resonance. These signals can be personal symbols, mythic archetypes, or spontaneous synchronicities that speak directly to the individual's path. This is the opposite of the simulacrum, which presents endless information without resonance, flat, artificial, and devoid of true meaning. The Resonance Journal. Each day, write down 3 things that felt deeply symbolic or meaningful, whether an event, an image, a dream, or a phase that stood out. Reflect on why they resonated and how they might be part of a pattern guiding your will. Over time, this will retrain perception to prioritize meaning over noise. Reverse frame problem thinking, learning what to ignore. The frame problem is the inability to determine what matters. A mind overwhelmed by excess frames becomes paralyzed. The solution is not to try and process everything, but to cultivate the art of strategic ignorance. Reverse frame problem thinking is the practice of learning what to ignore, so the cognition is focused and sharpened rather than diffused into entropy. The negentropic cut. Each morning, identify one category of information that you will deliberately ignore for the day, whether social media, political discourse, trivial conversations, or any external simulacrum that drains cognitive energy. Each week, try to dedicate at least one day where you are immersed in the creation of the divine, nature, not the creation of man. Nature's signs and symbols are faithful to the divine harmony. The creation of man, on the other hand, is the simulacrum, where signs become ever less faithful and anchored to their true meaning and purpose. Given enough time in nature, the natural harmony is absorbed into personal harmony through osmosis and exercised through the will. Notice how much cognitive space is freed and how much perception becomes clear without excess frames. Over time, this practice will train the sword of discernment, making the mind an active force rather than a passive receiver. Cognitive praxis, that training the negentropic mind. These practices must not be abstract theories, but daily disciplines that actively restructure perception. A negentropic mind is one that filters stimuli based on symbolic resonance, amplifying meaning while dampening noise, practices strategic ignorance, eliminating the irrelevant before it clutters cognition, orients itself towards the divine will, using a sharpened perception to navigate the world. The salience mandala. Draw a circle divided into 2 halves. On one side, write what you will prioritize, the symbols, ideas, and perceptions that resonate. On the other, write what you will ignore, the entropic distractions of the simulacrum. Place it where you can see it each morning as a cognitive map of your daily will. Synchronicity, the negentropic signal in the noise. The role of synchronicity in cognitive negentropy. In an entropic mind, perception is fragmented, overwhelmed by a sea of arbitrary information. Nothing seems to connect because meaning itself is scattered. As one reclaims will through symbolic resonance and reverse frame problem thinking, something shifts. Patterns emerge and reality begins to speak in synchronicities. Synchronicity is the opposite of noise. It is the alignment of internal and external meaning. Synchronicities are not coincidences. They are reflections of the inner world organizing itself. When synchronicities increase, it signals that cognition is becoming negentropic, aligning with the deeper structure of reality. However, not all synchronicities are affirmations. Many arise to highlight what must be confronted. Synchronicity as unveiling of the repressed. The unconscious does not communicate in rational arguments. It speaks in images, dreams, symbols, and synchronicities. When something is ignored, repressed, or unresolved, synchronicities repeat around it, trying to draw attention to the neglected aspects of the self. These are not random echoes. They are neglected fragments of the will attempting to reintegrate. A mind that resists transformation will see synchronicities as a coincidence. A mind that seeks alignment will recognize them as messages. If a theme recurs in synchronicity, it means attention is needed. Something buried must be faced, processed, or integrated before will can move forward. Recognizing and engaging synchronicity. To engage synchronicity, one must pay attention to thematic recurrence. If the same symbols, numbers, names, or encounters keep appearing, they are not random. They are reflections of something unresolved or emergent. Interrogate the emotional resonance. How does the synchronicity make you feel? If it stirs discomfort, it likely points to an ignored wound. If it excites you, it may indicate a path forward. Apply the mirror principle. Synchronicities are mirrors of the inner state. Ask, what inside me is this reflecting? What truth am I avoiding that this is trying to reveal? Take action. Acknowledging a synchronicity is not enough. It is a call to action. If the pattern reflects an unresolved past, it must be addressed. If it reveals a direction forward, it must be acted upon. Synchronicity as a praxis of alignment. When actively engaged, a synchronicity becomes a guidance system, showing where will must direct its attention. The more one hones symbolic resonance and discernment, the stronger and clearer synchronicities become. A life aligned with will is filled with meaningful synchronicities, not because reality is changing, but because perception has been purified to see what was always there. The synchronicity map. Keep a small notebook. Every time a notable synchronicity occurs, write it down. After a few weeks, review for patterns. What themes emerge? Identify what these patterns reveal about your current state. What needs resolution? What path is opening? Act on what is revealed. This is the key. Chapter 3, the Volitional Negentropy Method, VNM. The purpose of VNM. The Volitional Negentropy Method, VNM, is a structured praxis designed to reverse the entropy of will, allowing the individual to clarify perception by removing cognitive noise, strengthen volitional force by disentangling will from external conditioning, align with the divine will by recognizing and integrating meaningful patterns. VNM is the active counterpart to volitional dissent and reclamation, VDR, which was introduced earlier. While VDR retrieves lost aspects of will from the depths, VNM refines, sharpens, and directs will towards negentropic alignment. VNM is not a single exercise, but a methodology, structured into 3 progressive phases. 1. Cognitive negentropy. Reclaiming attention, filtering distractions, and increasing awareness of meaningful data. 2. Symbolic alignment. Enhancing sensitivity to patterns, archetypes, and synchronicities to synchronize perception with reality's deeper structure. 3. Volitional primacy. Strengthening the will's active force, ensuring that perception is not just clear, but directed with intent. Each phase contains theory, technique, and exercise, ensuring direct applicability. Phase 1, Cognitive Negentropy. Understanding cognitive entropy. The web of simulacra generates informational noise, overwhelming perception with irrelevant stimuli. The default state of the modern mind is reactive, fragmented, and passive, constantly pulled by external forces. The first step of VNM is reducing cognitive entropy, creating a state of directed attention rather than scattered reaction. 2. The principles of selective attention. Attention is the fuel of will. Where attention flows, energy follows. Cognitive negentropy requires radical discernment, consciously choosing what enters and influences the mind. Every moment of attention given to the simulacra is a moment stolen from will. 3. Practical exercise. The attention audit. For one full day, record everything that captures your attention. What media do you consume? What thoughts dominate your mind? What external influences shape your perception? Review the audit. Identify entropy sources. What wastes attention? What provides clarity and insight? Implement a purge. Reduce low-value information intake. Establish daily periods of uninterrupted focus. Begin a practice of intentional mental curation, choosing what enters the mind. This creates a foundation for symbolic alignment. Phase 2, symbolic alignment. 1. The importance of patterns in perception. The mind craves structure. It is wired to detect patterns. In an entropic state, perception is filled with irrelevant patterns, media cycles, trivial discourse. In an aligned state, perception locks into meaningful structures, revealing the hidden order in apparent chaos. 2. The principle of symbolic resonance. The universe is not random, it is symbolically structured. The key to alignment is to recognizing the symbols that resonate with the will. Symbolic resonance means distinguishing deep meaning from superficial noise, recognizing synchronicity as a signal, not coincidence. 3. The symbolic journal. For 7 days, record any symbol, pattern, or synchronicity that stands out. Reflect on why it resonates. Ask, why did this capture my attention? What internal state does it reflect? What does it reveal about my current path? Identify personal archetypal symbols. Over time, specific symbols will recur. These are keys to your personal alignment. Phase 3, volitional primacy. 1. The concept of will as a directive force. Negentropy alone is not enough. Will must be active, not just receptive. Volitional primacy means shifting from passive recognition of patterns to active engagement with them. 2. The principle of willful integration. When patterns emerge, they must be acted upon. This is the difference between mere recognition and true volitional mastery. 3. Practical exercise, the 3-action rule. Identify a synchronicity, pattern, or insight that emerges. Take 3 concrete actions based off it within 48 hours. If a symbol recurs, engage with its deeper meaning. If an opportunity presents itself, take immediate action. If resistance arises, analyze what is blocking the will. This practice ensures that insight translates into movement. The power of VNM. VNM is a daily discipline, not a one-time exercise. The will is either entropic, scattered, and passive, or negentropic, focused and active. Through cognitive negentropy, symbolic alignment, and volitional primacy, the individual purifies their perception, attunes to meaningful structures, and acts with volitional force. Book 4, Infinite Archetype Theory. Chapter 1, The Archetypal Nature of Reality. The Volutist recognizes that all things, every object, thought, action, and being are archetypes. This truth extends beyond the limited frameworks of classical archetypal psychology and mysticism, which isolate only a handful of fundamental symbols. Instead, we assert that archetypes are infinite, that reality itself is a projection of archetypal truths, and that human consciousness exists as the mechanism through which these archetypes are encountered, processed, and synthesized. Everything we perceive is an archetype, not merely recurrent symbols like the hero or the shadow, but the very existence of a tree, a door, a flame, a river, a name, a whisper. Every event is an archetypal manifestation, a reflection of underlying internal truths that seek recognition. Even thought itself is archetypal. Our mind does not create meaning arbitrarily, but is constantly attempting to interpret and synthesize the infinite archetypal structures that define reality. The Volutist does not simply analyze archetypes, but lives within them, recognizing that every moment, every interaction, and every sensation is an encoded expression of deeper metaphysical realities. The fracturing of archetypal wholeness. Why then does humanity struggle to perceive reality as it truly is? Because we exist in a fractured state. the same fracturing described in anthrogenesis, where the one became many. Consciousness is the process of fragmentation. We are not born with a unified understanding of the infinite archetype, but must painstakingly reconstruct it. The collective unconscious, the subconscious, and the shadow exist as storage for unprocessed archetypes, the archetypes we have encountered but failed to integrate. The simulacrum deepens the fracture. Modern society bombards us with synthetic, hollow representations of archetypes, further severing us from authentic recognition. The Volitist seeks to reunify the fragmented archetypal field, to restore the seamless perception of reality where nothing is random, nothing is disconnected, nothing is meaningless. The archetypal feedback loop, perception, recognition, synthesis. The Volitist achieves this by training the mind and body to exist in a perpetual state of archetypal recognition and synthesis. This requires a threefold process. Perception, to see everything as an archetype. Every person, every action, every word carries an encoded reality waiting to be deciphered. Recognition, to acknowledge the deeper truth beneath the surface. Nothing is neutral. Every encounter is an invitation to deeper alignment. Synthesis, to integrate the archetypal truth into oneself, ensuring that no archetype remains unprocessed, thus eliminating fragmentation. When this cycle becomes automatic, the practitioner transcends the fractured state and enters a seamless state of being, where every breath, every motion, and every thought aligns with the divine will. At the culmination of this process, the Volitist no longer perceives archetypes as external forces to be interpreted. They become the archetype itself. Their very existence becomes an expression of the divine will. Every action becomes an unbroken act of cosmic alignment. The self ceases to be divided from reality, but is reality itself. This is the true goal of Volitism, not merely to understand, but to embody, to become a living, breathing, walking manifestation of the divine, where perception and will are one and the same. Chapter 2, on movement. Practice Qigong, Tai Chi, and Yoga. The unity of body and mind. Movement, when performed with meditative focus, creates a feedback loop between the body and mind. Conscious, intentional movement prevents the mind from wandering and anchors awareness into the present moment. This embodied cognition helps dissolve the typical fragmentation between thought and action, which is often a source of internal dissonance. Breath as the conductor of will. Breath control is central to all these practices. In yoga, pranayama regulates energy. In Tai Chi and Qigong, breath flows in sync with movement, directing Qi, or life force. Breath serves as a bridge between autonomic and conscious control, allowing the practitioner to influence their nervous system, emotional state, and depth of presence. This direct engagement with one's physiological rhythms enhance both volitional mastery and flow states. Rhythmic cyclical motion inducing flow. Repetitive flowing movements naturally entrain the mind into alpha and theta brainwave states, which are associated with deep relaxation, heightened awareness, and effortless action. This state of flow is characterized by unself-conscious movement, where action and awareness become one. It mirrors what many mystics describe as an alignment with the divine will, movement occurring through you rather than being forced by you. Symbolic resonance and archetypal motion. Many of these practices encode archetypal movements that mirror cosmic principles. Tai Chi, for example, embodies yin-yang balance, shifting between contraction and expansion, reflecting the breadth of the universe itself. Similarly, yoga postures often mimic natural forces, trees, animals, warriors, aligning the practitioner with primal archetypes of existence. Microcosm-macrocosm alignment. By harmonizing breath, movement, and intent, the practitioner attunes themselves to a larger rhythm, whether that be natural cycles, energetic fields, or divine will. This creates an effect similar to entrainment, where an individual being synchronizes with higher order harmonics, breaking free from the chaotic dissonance of everyday life. Engagement with the subtle body. These disciplines often acknowledge an energetic anatomy, chakras, meridians, chi pathways, which can be accessed through movement. Even if understood metaphorically, these practices offer a method to recalibrate one's internal structure, breaking stagnant patterns and restoring a state of inner clarity. Ritual as a means of unlocking the will. Repetitive, meaningful movement creates a ritualized structure that allows a deeper entrainment into a desired state. Like the volatilous practice of the dual luminaries, these movements serve as embodied invocations, focusing intent through motion, allowing one to channel will into the physical world. Why it works for divine alignment and flow. The state of flow arises when the ego dissolves, the body acts effortlessly, and the mind is engaged in the present task. These practices accelerate the process by overriding discursive thought through rhythmic movement, bridging the conscious and subconscious through breath and presence, aligning microcosmic actions with macrocosmic principles, allowing will to move through the practitioner rather than being obstructed by internal resistance. These disciplines train the reclaimer to shift from passive reaction to active embodiment of will, allowing greater access to volitional mastery. Chapter 3. Volitional Flow Praxis, training the body to align with the infinite archetype. Now that we have established the theory of the infinite archetype, we must actualize it through structured praxis that will allow the volatilist to enter and remain in a state of perpetual divine alignment. This is not a temporary meditative practice, but a total transformation of movement, breath, and perception, so that every action, every motion, every breath is an expression of divine will. Core principles of volitional flow praxis. The praxis is built upon three interwoven pillars. Breath as a bridge between conscious and unconscious will. Breath is the interface between autonomic and volitional control. By training breath to be perpetually intentional, we merge conscious agency with subconscious alignment. This is the key to making divine flow an effortless, permanent state, rather than something that fades after practice. Movement as an archetypal expression. Every motion is imbued with archetypal significance. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted. Just as Tai Chi, Yoga, and Qigong use structured forms, volitional flow praxis will train movements that condition the practitioner to feel and enact archetypal synthesis. Eventually, this becomes automatic, meaning that even the simplest act, walking, sitting, lifting an object, is in total synchronicity with the divine will. Perception as a constant archetypal recognition. The volatilist must train the mind to never lose sight of the archetypal nature of reality. Every object, every person, every movement, and every moment must be recognized as an archetypal truth, rather than a mere thing. This will be trained through focused observational exercises that rewire perception into a state of unbroken synthesis. When these three elements are combined, the practitioner ceases to experience movement as a mechanical function and instead moves as the living embodiment of the divine flow. Stages of training in volitional flow praxis. To ensure mastery, the praxis must be divided into three progressive stages. Stage 1, the reclamation of the breath. Before the volatilist can align their movement and perception, they must first reclaim control over the breath. This is the most fundamental interface between mind and body. Primary exercise, the rhythm of the divine will. A structured breathing technique where every inhale is an invocation of archetypal recognition and every exhale is an active synthesis. Breath is slowed and extended in specific ratios to reinforce autonomic control and volitional intent. This will begin as a seated or standing practice and will later be integrated into all movement. Training goal, to make breath permanently volitional, never unconscious, never passive. To use breath as a constant point of reference for alignment with the divine will. Stage 2, the movements of archetypal synchrony. Once the breath is reclaimed, the body must be conditioned into fluid archetypal motion. This is the stage where the practitioner transforms mundane action into sacred embodiment. Primary exercise. The 8 archetypal forms. Instead of generic movements, the volitist will learn 8 fundamental and archetypal motions, each one corresponding to core principles of volitional mastery. These forms are not rigid like traditional martial arts katas, but are instead designed to awaken archetypal resonance in the body. Every movement will be tied to breath and intention, reinforcing the infinite archetype in action. Training goal. To condition the body to move only in alignment with archetypal truths. To dissolve any hesitation, sloppiness, or unconscious movement, replacing it with deliberate volitional action. Stage 3. The praxis of perpetual divine flow. Once the volitist has mastered archetypal breath and movement, the final stage is to remove the training wheels and enter full, permanent synchrony with the divine will. Primary exercise. The walking embodiment of the archetype. The practitioner will be guided into moving through everyday life while maintaining unbroken recognition, breath control, and archetypal motion. This is where we break the final barrier, the illusion that there is a practice and a real life. Everything is practice. Everything is life. Everything is alignment. Training goal. To make the divine flow a perpetual, effortless state. To eliminate all moments of unconsciousness, ensuring that every breath, every movement, every thought is a flawless expression of volitional mastery. The end state, the perpetual living divine. At the culmination of this praxis, the practitioner is no longer simply practicing volitional flow. They are volitional flow. They no longer do archetypal movement. They move only in archetypes. They no longer focus on breath. It is always volitional. They no longer try to align with the divine. They are already aligned. At this stage, the volitist walks as the living existential divine, permanently in harmony with the infinite archetype, permanently aware, present, intentional, and untouchable by the fractures of the simulacrum. Chapter 4. The breath of divine will. The metaphysical and archetypal significance of breath. Breath is the first and final action of existence. Before the mind awakens, before movement is willed, before language is formed, breath flows. It is the bridge between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen, the voluntary and the involuntary. To the volitist, breath is the primordial archetype, the first fractal of existence, the pulse of the divine fracturing into multiplicity. In Vedic thought, prana is not mere air, but the very essence of life itself, an omnipresent energy that interweaves all being. In Taoist cosmology, the breath is the rhythm of qi, the movement of the Tao in microcosm. In volitism, breath is both, the thread of the infinite archetype running through all things. Every inhale is an act of receiving the divine archetype's essence, drawing in order from chaos, form from formlessness, will from the abyss. Every exhale is an act of synthesis and expression, transmuting breath into action, movement, and volitional mastery. The body is not just a vessel, but a conduit for breath to shape existence itself. Thus, breath is not a passive function. It is the anchor that binds man to the divine flow. The problem, however, is that modern man breathes without awareness, a passive, fragmented act that mirrors his fragmented consciousness. Just as the will slumbers in the web of simulacra, so too does the breath become shallow, unconscious, and reactive. To reclaim the breath is to awaken the will. This chapter will reveal how to harness breath as a permanent volitional force, uniting it with movement and awareness until the practitioner is no longer separate from the divine flow, but is it, embodied. The physiological mechanics of divine breathwork. To transform breath into an instrument of volitional mastery, we must reclaim control over the depth of breath, ensuring full diaphragmatic inhalations that maximize pranic absorption, The rhythm of breath, creating an intentional cycle that entrains the body, mind, and nervous system in harmonic flow. The intent of breath, linking breath to conscious volition so that every inhale and exhale is a deliberate act. Depth of breath, the reclamation of vital energy. The unconscious man breathes shallowly, drawing breath only into his upper lungs. This starves the system of vital prana and reinforces a state of passivity and reaction. The volatus, by contrast, descends breath into the depths of being, activating the diaphragm, expanding the lower abdomen, and drawing prana to the root of the will. The breath of the reclaimer. Exercise. Inhale deeply through the nose, allowing the diaphragm to expand downward like a filling vessel. The abdomen should rise fully, not just the chest. This ensures that vital energy saturates the entire being. Exhale slowly and completely, ensuring no stagnation. Continue this cycle until breath no longer feels forced but flows as a natural extension of will. Rhythm of breath, synchronizing with the macrocosm. Once depth is reclaimed, breath must be disciplined into a cosmic rhythm, one that aligns the microcosmic breath of the practitioner with the larger breath of existence. The divine ratio. Inspired by ancient breath patterns, this technique structures breath into a cycle that mirrors the fractal rhythm of the divine. Inhale for 4 counts, receiving essence. Hold for 4 counts, crystallizing intent. Exhale for 4 counts, synthesizing into action. Hold for 4 counts, returning to stillness. This rhythm is a breath of the infinite archetype, entraining the volatus into alignment, not just during practice, but as a permanent state. Intent of breath, anchoring the practitioner in divine flow. Breath without intent is mere respiration, but breath with intent becomes the axis of volitional mastery. Every inhale must be recognized as an act of reception, not simply oxygen, but the absorption of archetypal energy. Every exhale must be recognized as an act of creation, the expression of the divine will into the manifest world. Every hold between breaths is the silent moment of synthesis, the space where chaos meets order, where intention becomes reality. To practice this, the volatus must internalize breath as a ritual, not something they do, but rather something they become. How to breathe for permanent alignment. The ultimate goal is not just to practice this breath work in meditation, but to embody it permanently. Every breath, every moment must be deep, activating the full capacity of being, rhythmic, synchronized with the eternal flow of the macrocosm, intentional, a conscious act of alignment with the divine will. The final practice, the breath of the living divine. Once breath is fully reclaimed, it will no longer be something that must be practiced. It will become the default state of existence. The practitioner will no longer experience moments of unconscious breath. Every inhale and exhale will be an act of sacred recognition. Even in moments of exertion, stress, or crisis, breath will remain anchored in volitional mastery. This is the state where the practitioner ceases to be in flow and instead becomes flow itself. Chapter 5. The 8 Archetypal Forms, Divine Motion in Alignment with the Will. Movement as a living praxis of the infinite archetype. The purpose of the 8 archetypal forms. The breath has been reclaimed as the bridge between the conscious and unconscious, the microcosm and the macrocosm, the divine and the individual will. Now we must embody this alignment through movement. In many traditions, movement-based praxis, yoga, tai chi, qigong, harness flow states, but in volatism we take this further. Every movement must reflect a fundamental archetypal principle, a distilled essence of the infinite archetypes we encounter daily. Each form must be performed in full volitional control, seamlessly synchronizing breath, motion, and intent. Ultimately, these movements will not remain as a separate practice, but will train the practitioner to move through daily life with the same archetypal precision, fluidity, and divine alignment. The 8 archetypal forms serve as the codex of sacred movement, encoding universal principles of volitional mastery into embodied practice. The structure of each archetypal form. Each movement will be encoded with 1. The archetypal principle. What universal truth does this movement embody? 2. The physical motion, the actual structure and flow of the movement. 3. The breath synchronization, how breath and motion align. 4. The intent and volitional action, the internal awareness and manifestation of will during the movement. 5. The application beyond practice, how this movement becomes a living principle in daily life. The 8 archetypal forms. Each movement reflects an essential force of volitional mastery, mirroring the primal interplay of the infinite archetypes, the ultimate goal, the perpetual praxis of divine motion. These 8 archetypal forms must begin as practice, but ultimately they will become the way the volatus moves through life. Each and every step must be conscious. Every motion must be archetypal. Every breath, movement, and action becomes part of the continuous feedback loop between microcosm and macrocosm. When perfected, there is no practice, only living, breathing, volitional mastery. Number 1, the form of the axis. The form of the axis, the stillness at the center of all things. Archetypal principle, the unmoving center, the eye of the storm, the eternal axis of the divine will. The world moves, but the reclaimer remains sovereign. Physical motion. The practitioner stands with feet grounded, spine upright, hands resting at the center line, hara or solar plexus. All motion initiates and returns to this stance, ensuring awareness of the center point of will. Breath synchronization. Inhale, expand the diaphragm and envision the stability rooting into the infinite. Exhale, release external noise, reinforcing internal sovereignty. Intent and volitional action. This is the stance of absolute awareness, embodying the pillar of self-determined being. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to carry this stillness into action, never losing the internal axis even in movement. 2. The form of the serpent, the flowing adaptability of the will. Archetypal principle. The serpent is fluidity, adaptability, and mastery over change. It moves without resistance, yet remains completely in control. Physical motion. The body moves in coiling, undulating arcs, shifting weight seamlessly between stances. Movements mirror the serpent weaving through reality, a continuous, intentional, non-hesitant action. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw in the energy of adaptability. Exhale, let go of rigidity and flow seamlessly with intent. Intent and volitional action. Movement and thought must become one seamless flow, reacting without hesitation, yet always with purpose. Application beyond practice. This trains the perpetual volitional response, never stuck, never frozen, always moving with the flow of the will rather than against it. 3. The form of the inferno. Will as an unstoppable force of creation and destruction. Archetypal principle. The inferno is the fire of transformation, embodying relentless volitional force. It purifies, destroys, and creates anew. Physical motion. Rapid, forceful strikes and movements, bursting forth from the center like flames consuming hesitation. Arms and legs extended in sharp, decisive gestures. No uncertainty, no retraction. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw power into the core. Exhale, explosive release, assertion of the divine will. Intent and volitional action. Movement must be absolute once committed. There is no retreat. This form burns away fear, hesitation, and passivity. Application beyond practice. The practitioner trains themselves to act with absolute conviction, cutting through doubt as fire consumes illusion. 4. The form of the veil, mastery over the unseen and unmanifested. Archetypal principle. The veil is mystery, paradox, and unseen mastery, the control of what is not yet revealed. Physical motion, slow, deliberate weaving movements that conceal and reveal, like the unfolding of a hidden truth. Hands and body shift in controlled, flowing concealment and emergence patterns. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw in unseen potential. Exhale, reveal only what is necessary. Retain mastery over what is hidden. Intent and volitional action. Movement must always retain an element of mystery, never fully exposing, always commanding the unknown. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to control what they reveal, mastering presence, perception, and the strategic use of hidden will. Number 5, the form of the expanding horizon, the boundless reach of will into the infinite. Archetypal principle, expansion of consciousness, vision, and volitional reach. The realization that will is limitless, only bound by perception and assumption. The movement outward, the unfolding of greater awareness and capacity. Physical motion. The practitioner extends their limbs outward, opening fully. Movements create expanding circles and spirals, as if pushing through unseen boundaries. Steps are deliberate yet exploratory, always reaching beyond prior limits. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw in infinite potential. Exhale, expand the will into the unseen. Intent and volitional action. Each movement represents breaking through perceived limitations. The practitioner must fully believe in the infinite reach of their will. Application beyond practice. One must never shrink away from expansion, always seeking new frontiers of growth and mastery. This form teaches that what one assumes to be impossible is merely unclaimed potential. Number 6, the form of the binding coil, the interwoven dance of unity and control. Archetypal principle, interconnection, synthesis, and mastery over disparate elements. The realization that will is strongest when harmonized with the whole. The act of binding forces together, bringing harmony to chaos. Physical motion, movements coil and interweave, arms spiraling, steps looping back before flowing forward. The practitioner moves as if weaving unseen threads, creating a lattice of control. There is constant motion, never static, yet always balanced. Breath synchronization. Inhale, draw together fragmented energies. Exhale, weave them into a singular force. Intent and volitional action. This is the form of integration of turning chaos into order. One must feel completely at home with complexity, never overwhelmed by the multiplicity of existence. Application beyond practice. The practitioner learns to bring conflicting elements into harmony, be it thoughts, emotions, or external circumstances. This form cultivates the ability to navigate and unify disparate aspects of reality. Number 7, the form of the serving blade, the sacred act of cutting away illusion and attachment. Archetypal principle, the necessity of destruction in pursuit of purity, the power of removing what no longer serves the divine will. The blade is both a weapon and a scalpel, cutting falsehoods, illusions, and excess. Physical motion, the body moves in precise cutting gestures, arms slicing through space. Steps are hard, decisive, without hesitation. The practitioner never lingers, never doubts, only executes. Breath synchronization. Inhale, summon clarity, recognize what must be cut away. Exhale, strike cleanly, severing illusion. Intent and volitional action. Every movement must be completely final. There is no wavering, no second guessing. The practitioner embodies the understanding that sacrifice is a sacred act, making space for greater alignment. Application beyond practice. One must not fear severing ties with falsehoods, limiting beliefs, or stagnant realities. This form teaches how to recognize when something no longer serves the will and act decisively to remove it. Number 8, the form of the absolute will, the motionless movement where all forms resolve into one. Archetypal principle, the final state of volitional mastery, the realization that there is no separation between self, action, and the divine will. The practitioner is no longer bound by archetypes, but has become the living embodiment of all of them. Physical motion, the practitioner moves seamlessly between all other forms, shifting without pause or transition. Movements appear paradoxical, both spontaneous and inevitable, effortless, yet absolute. At times, there is no movement at all, yet the will is undeniably active. Breath synchronization. Inhale, recognize the totality of will. Exhale, dissolve into it. Intent and volitional action. This form is no longer about practice, but full embodiment. A state where movement is no longer something one does, but something one is. The practitioner has become the walking, the breathing, the thinking, the divine motion. Application beyond practice. This is perpetual praxis. There is no separation between the discipline and the daily life. The practitioner moves through the world with perfect volitional alignment, never in conflict, never in hesitation. The 8 archetypal forms, a completed system. With the completion of all 8 archetypal forms, the codex of movement, involutism, is now whole. Number 1, the form of the axis, the eternal stillness of the sovereign will. Number 2, the form of the serpent, the flowing adaptability of the master. Number 3, the form of the inferno, the unstoppable force of transformation. Number 4, the form of the veil, the mastery of the unseen. Number 5, the form of the expanding horizon, the infinite reach of the will. Number 6, the form of the binding coil, the interwoven dance of control. Number 7, the form of the severing blade, the sacred act of cutting away. Number 8, the form of the absolute will, the final state where all motion resolves into one. Each practitioner must begin by training these movements in sequence, but ultimately, the goal is for them to transcend the forms entirely, allowing all movements to flow directly from the divine will. Chapter 6, the initiation process, entering the path of the divine motion. The gateway to perpetual alignment with the will. The initiation into the 8 archetypal forms is not merely the learning of movements, but the dissolution of hesitation, doubt, and unconscious action in favor of absolute volitional alignment. The initiate must pass through 3 distinct phases, each stripping away layers of dissonance and conditioning to prepare the body, mind, and will for full integration with divine motion. The initiation process is structured as follows. Number 1, the unbinding. Severance from the web of simulacra. Number 2, the attunement, synchronization with the 8 forms and breath. Number 3, the embodiment, dissolution of separation between praxis and life. This is not simply a ritual, it is a reprogramming of reality itself as experienced by the practitioner. Phase 1, the unbinding, severance from the web of simulacra. Purpose, strip away unconscious movement, reactive action, and passive existence. Identify where one's motion is dictated by external forces rather than divine will. Instill absolute bodily awareness. Every step, breath, and gesture must be conscious. Initiatory rite, the silent walk. The initiate must walk a specific distance in absolute total silence. No speaking, no reacting, no unnecessary motion. Every movement must be intentional. No fidgeting, no automatic reactions, no conscious shifts in posture. The initiate must be fully aware of the breath, synchronizing each step with the inhale and exhale. Any lapse into automatic thinking or thought or behavior requires starting over. This process is repeated until the initiate can move in absolute control without external stimulus dictating their movement. Outcome. The initiate realizes how much of their movement has been hijacked by conditioning, how often they shift, pace, or fidget, or react without will. Through this practice, the first veil is lifted, motion is reclaimed. Phase 2, the attunement, synchronization with the 8 forms and breath. Purpose, train the body to breathe and move in complete volitional unity. Synchronize each motion to breath so movement becomes a seamless extension of intent. Begin embodying the 8 forms, using them to reshape how action is taken. Initiatory rite, the ritual of the 8-fold breath. The initiate performs each of the 8 forms in a single sequence, ensuring breath is perfectly in sync with motion. No movement is unconscious or automatic. The will is fully engaged in each shift, gesture, and transition. If at any moment breath and motion fall out of alignment, this sequence must be restarted. This practice rewires the autonomic nervous system, making conscious action the default state. Outcome: the initiate merges breath, motion, and volition, laying the foundation for full integration. The body is no longer a passive vessel, but an instrument of divine will. Phase 3, the embodiment, disillusion of separation between praxis and life. Purpose: eliminate the distinction between practice and daily existence. Ensure every movement, action, and breath is permanently volitional. Integrate the 8 forms into daily tasks, so life itself becomes the art of divine motion. Initiatory rite, the ritual of eternal motion. The initiate must go through an entire day where every single movement follows the principles of the 8 forms. There can be no unnecessary or unaligned motion. Every step, breath, gesture, and action must be volitional. Eating, drinking, working, even interacting with others must be done in total alignment with breathwork and movement principles. The initiate must experience a full waking cycle of absolute volitional motion before final initiation. Outcome: the practitioner no longer separates practice from life. Movement is now permanently intentional and synchronized with the divine will. The final veil is lifted. There is no longer a distinction between the self and the motion of the universe. The final oath, the will manifested in flesh. Once the 3 phases are completed, the practitioner takes the final oath, declaring, "I move as the will moves. I breathe as the will breathes. There is no hesitation, no doubt, no division between myself and the divine motion. From this moment forth, every step, every motion, every breath is volitional. I do not act, I am the action. I do not move, I am the motion of the infinite." After this moment, the practitioner is fully initiated, and the 8 forms become their permanent state of being. Chapter 7. The Path of the Volutist. Volutism is not a philosophy confined to words on a page, nor a practice limited to moments of ritual. It is a total transformation of existence. The path we have laid out is not simply a guide to self-discipline or a method for cultivating mindfulness. It is the blueprint for the reclamation of the will itself. Through the teachings in this treatise, the practitioner has learned that every action, thought, and breath can be brought into alignment with the divine will. That motion itself is sacred, not merely a means of movement, but the very expression of volition in its purest form. That the fractured archetypes of existence are not separated from the self, but aspects to be reintegrated, embodied, and harmonized until nothing else remains but absolute flow. This is not a path of fleeting enlightenment or temporary states of transcendence. The goal of the Volutist is not to achieve alignment for mere moments, but to live in a state of perpetual harmony with the divine. No longer reactive, no longer fragmented, no longer at war with the self, but a walking manifestation of the will itself. The journey forward. The completion of this text does not mark the end of the practitioner's journey. Rather, it signals the beginning of a new mode of being, one in which hesitation, unconscious action, and inner dissonance are no longer tolerated. From this moment forward, the volitist moves with absolute intentionality. Every step is taken in awareness. Every breath is synchronized with the macrocosm. Every motion is an act of divine recognition. The web of simulacra may still surround us, but the volitist no longer moves as the world commands. The external world may try to pull the practitioner into automation, but now every act is an assertion of sovereignty. Final words: the ultimate state of being. True volitional mastery is not a goal to be reached, it is a state to be lived. When there is no longer a distinction between thought and action, no gap between intention and motion, no break in the eternal rhythm of the divine flow, then the practitioners become more than human. They have become volition incarnate. They have become a conduit of the divine will. They have become the eternal motion. This is the path. This is the calling. Move as the will moves. Book 5, Chapter 1, Love as the Alchemical Mirror, Twin Flames, Projection, and Volitional Mastery. Love as the Alchemical Mirror. Love, in its many forms, acts as one of the most powerful alchemical forces for transformation. It is through relationships, whether romantic, eros, fraternal, philia, or transcendent, agape, that we are given the clearest mirror of ourselves. The tensions, irritations, and deep emotional entanglements we experience with others often reveal unresolved aspects of our psyche, forcing us to confront hidden truths about who we are. We may believe ourselves to be independent, self-aware beings, but nothing tests self-mastery quite like intimacy. The people closest to us do not merely reflect our external behaviors. They expose the unseen aspects of our own minds, the strengths we deny, the flaws we suppress, and the wounds we refuse to acknowledge. Through love, we are given an opportunity for deep self-interrogation. Yet most do not recognize this opportunity. Instead, they recoil, project, or attempt to control others as a way to avoid facing themselves. The volitist, however, must not resist the mirror. Love is not an enemy of the will, but it is one of the greatest refining fires. When we embrace love, both in its beauty and in its discomfort, we engage in a form of alchemy, transmuting our attachments, fears, and distortions into something higher. The threefold fire: eros, philia, and agape. To navigate the alchemy of love, one must first recognize its three primary forms. Eros, passionate love, the fire of attraction, desire, and longing. This love is the most volatile, often bound up in attachment, infatuation, and the need for validation. Eros, when undisciplined, is enslaving, yet when understood, it becomes the force that propels profound transformation. Philia, fraternal love, the steady warmth of deep friendship, loyalty, and camaraderie. This love builds trust, fosters shared purpose, and strengthens the will through companionship. While less explosive than Eros, it can be just as revelatory. True friendships reflect back to us our strengths and our weaknesses. Agape, transcendent love, the love that exists beyond attachment, the love of the divine, of humanity, of the world itself. Agape is love without possession, without expectation. It is the highest form of love, one that does not seek to claim but to uplift, liberate, and align with the divine will. A volitist doesn't merely seek love as an experience. They use love as a tool to see themselves clearly, to dissolve illusion, and to cultivate mastery over their own emotions and attachments. Twin flames and the alchemical trial of the self. Among all relationships, there exists some that feel fated, as if the universe itself has conspired to bring two souls together. The concept of twin flames is often romanticized, yet at its core, it represents a trial of transformation rather than an idyllic union. The twin flame as the great catalyst. A true twin flame is not a perfect lover, nor a peaceful companion. They are often a force of shattering. When twin flames meet, they experience an overwhelming pull, one that unearths the deepest wounds and hidden distortions of the self. It is an alchemical crucible in which all illusions must burn away. Mirror and fire. Twin flames function as both mirror and fire. The mirror forces us to see the aspects of ourselves that we have buried. If we are insecure, they will embody confidence. If we suppress anger, they will ignite rage within us. The fire consumes what is false. The illusions we have about love, identity, and control are set ablaze, leaving only the truth behind. Union and separation cycles. Because of this intensity, the twin flame dynamic is rarely stable. It often follows cycles of union and separation, as both individuals struggle to process the truths being revealed. Some will chase, others will run. But the real lesson is this. The twin flame does not exist to complete you. They exist to break you apart, so that you may complete yourself. The false twin and ego traps. Not all intense relationships are twin flames. Many are egoic traps, where projection, neediness, and attachment are mistaken for destiny. A true twin flame will challenge you to grow, while a false twin will reinforce your illusions. The volatists must distinguish between relationships that awaken them and relationships that merely entrap them in cycles of attachment. Egoic distortions, gaslighting, projection, and power struggles. Love is often where the ego is most defensive. We struggle to accept the truths that relationships reveal about us, so we distort reality to avoid confronting them. Projection as self-deception. When we resent a quality in another person, it is often because it exists within us. The boastful are irritated by others who boast. The controlling despise being controlled. The unfaithful suspect their partner of disloyalty. The traits we attack in others are often the shadows we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves. Gaslighting and cognitive dissonance. In relationships, one of the most insidious behaviors is gaslighting, the act of denying reality in order to maintain one's egoic self-perception. When faced with a truth that threatens their self-image, a person may deny their own mistakes, shifting blame to others, rewrite events to preserve their innocence, make the other person doubt their sanity, ensuring they remain in control. Gaslighting is not just something done by abusers. It is a defensive reaction of the ego when confronted with truths it cannot bear. The volatists must recognize when they themselves engage in this behavior and eradicate it from their interactions. Power struggles and control mechanisms. Love can become a battlefield for control. Those who fear losing power in relationships often exert domination over their partners, ensuring they never feel vulnerable themselves. This is an illusion. One who seeks control is, by definition, controlled by their own fear. The volatist path demands that love be approached without ownership, without distortion, without fear. The praxis of volitional love, mastering relationships through will. To truly harness love as an alchemical force, the volatists must cultivate awareness, discipline, and liberation in their relationships. Mirror work and relationship journaling. After every significant emotional reaction in a relationship, ask, what within me is being reflected? Identify patterns. Do the same types of people trigger you? Do the same conflicts arise? Write about moments where you felt defensive. What truths were you avoiding? Radical acceptance and non-resistance. Accept others as they are, without trying to change them. Recognize that your own discomfort with their flaws is your own lesson to learn. The path of the volitional lover. Love not from need, but from will. Seek love not for validation, but for growth. Do not fear love's impermanence. Love's highest form is liberation, not possession. The infant's gaze, dissolving hatred through empathetic reframing. The volatist must never allow hatred or resentment to take root within the subconscious. These emotions, left unchecked, act as toxins, not just corrupting our perception of others, but more dangerously, corroding the integrity of our own will. Negative emotions are not simply reactions, they are reinforcing loops, feeding into the very cycles of discord and suffering we seek to transcend. The thought experiment. Seeing the uncorrupted self. When consumed by resentment, anger, or ill will toward another, the volatist should engage in a simple but profound empathetic reframing exercise. Strip away the layers of conditioning. Envision the individual not as they are now, but as they once were, a newborn, a toddler, an unformed soul before the weight of the world was placed upon them. Acknowledge their untainted state. In this state, they were pure, untainted by circumstance, simulacra, or suffering. They were not yet consumed by pride, insecurity, aggression, or cruelty. They were simply a being filled with potential, deserving of care and nurture. Recognize the inevitability of conditioning. They did not choose the circumstances of their birth. They did not select the parents who raised them, the early environment that shaped them, or the experience that burned their patterns into place. Like all, they were dealt a hand, one that may have set them on a path of distortion before they ever had the tools to reflect or resist. See the chain of cause and effect. Their cruelty, selfishness, or ignorance is often not a personal failing, but the result of wounds left unhealed. What you despise in them may simply be a survival mechanism they adopted to navigate the world that was, at some point, unkind to them. Disarm the emotional reaction. By seeing them in this pure state, the weight of resentment begins to lift. This does not mean excusing their actions or absolving them of responsibility, but it removes the personal poison that hatred injects into the psyche. It allows you to engage from a position of clarity, not of the distorted haze of anger. Why this works: breaking the hate loop. Hate breeds more hate. The more we invest in resentment, the more we entrench ourselves in the very cycle of negativity we seek to escape. Empathy does not equal weakness. This exercise is not about justifying the actions of another. It is about freeing oneself from the corrosive effects of emotional enslavement. It allows for true volitional response. Once the raw emotional charge is removed, the volatilist can respond from will rather than react from impulse. You may still choose to disengage with harmful individuals, but you will do so from a place of sovereignty, not reactivity. Holding on to hate is like holding on to a poison and expecting the other person to die from it. The balance: personal agency versus circumstance. This exercise does not negate the power of personal agency. We all, at some point, reach an age where self-reflection and course correction become possible. Some individuals choose not to engage in this process, but that choice is theirs to bear. But as volatists, we must never allow our perception to be clouded by unchecked emotion. Hate is a fire that consumes the one who holds it. By engaging in this practice, the volatist ensures that their will remains clear, unburdened, and unshaken, free to act rather than merely react. The final alchemy: love as liberation. Love is not about finding completion in another. It is about becoming whole within oneself, using relationships as a mirror and a forge. The volatist does not cling. The volatist does not fear. They love with open hands and an unshaken will. Chapter 2. The Logos of the Will. Language as an act of creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. Abracadabra, from the Aramaic avra cadavra, meaning I create as I speak. The basic tool for manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. Philip K. Dick. The primordial power of speech. Language is not merely a human invention. It is primordial, embedded in the very structure of reality. In the Kabbalah, the Hebrew letters are not just phonetic symbols. They are divine emanations, conduits of creation itself. The Tetragrammaton, YHWH, or Yahweh, the ineffable name of God, was so sacred it was forbidden to be spoken, implying that speech itself holds power beyond mortal comprehension. In the Gospel of John, the universe is not sculpted, built, or formed. It is spoken into being. Let there be light, and there was light. Even in quantum mechanics, we find this principle echoed. The observer effect suggests that the mere act of perception alters reality. What, then, does the act of naming and defining do? If reality is a fractal linguistic structure, then to speak it is to create. Philip K. Dick speculated that language may be a self-replicating system, akin to DNA, suggesting that words themselves evolve, take on a life of their own, and restructure the very world they inhabit. Jean Baudrillard, in his postmodern critique, pointed out that language no longer refers to reality itself, but only to other words, signs, and simulacra, creating a world where meaning is untethered from the real. Yet, the volatist rejects Baudrillard's surrender to entropy. Instead, we turn toward the divine logos, the binding force behind meaning itself. Language is not just a human convention. It is the scaffolding of being, the instrument of will, the voice of the cosmos. The framing of reality, the architecture of thought. Words do not passively describe the world, they construct it. Speech is an act of framing, an imposition of will upon perception. Consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. If a language lacks a word for a concept, that concept becomes invisible to the speakers. This is not just theoretical, it is demonstrable. In cultures where there is no linguistic distinction between blue and green, people struggle to differentiate them. Language does not merely reflect reality, it shapes perception itself. The mind does not operate independently of language. Neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and general semantics have demonstrated that by altering the structure of our language, we alter the structure of our thought, and thereby the structure of our reality. Christopher Langan's cognitive theoretic model of the universe, or CTMU, goes further, proposing that reality itself is a self-processing language, where consciousness and linguistic structures intertwine. Saul Krikpe explored the rigidity of names, showing that naming something is an act of metaphysical anchoring, a fixing of identity into place. From this, the volatists must recognize that speech is not idle. To speak carelessly is to fracture one's reality. To speak with will is to impose order upon chaos. Thus, volatism teaches, every utterance is an act of will. To name something is to control its meaning. To master language is to master the self. The power of framing, language as an imposition of will. The postmodernists correctly identified that language does not neutrally reflect reality. It shapes it. Political rhetoric molds national identity and public sentiment. Marketing language hijacks perception, making the useless seem necessary. Identity labels define and confine individuals with preordained narratives. These are not passive descriptions. They are linguistic prisons, framing reality before we even have the chance to perceive it independently. This is the foundation of the simulacrum. Words veil reality, layering abstraction upon abstraction until the original referent is lost. The volatists must train in linguistic mastery, not to be enslaved by frames, but to construct them intentionally. One who does not control their language does not control their mind. The praxis of the volitional logos. To reclaim the sovereignty of speech, the volatists must adopt a disciplined linguistic praxis. Speak with precision. Never allow words to become detached from their intended force. Speak what you mean, and mean what you speak. Beware of framing. Every interaction involves frames. Be aware of those imposing them. If you do not frame reality, someone else will do it for you. Recognize the self-scripting nature of speech. The words you use about yourself become the script you live by. Avoid self-defeating language. Speak in alignment with your highest will. Practice sacred silence. Sometimes the most powerful use of language is abstaining from speech altogether. The volatist speaks only when necessary. Words are sacred. To control one's language is to control one's psyche. To master language is to master the material and immaterial realms alike. Language as a reflection of the archetypal divine. If speech is an act of creation, what is its archetypal reflection? It is the breath of the divine, the vibratory structure of the cosmos. Consider Om in Hinduism, the primordial vibration of existence. Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, YHWH, the sacred unspoken name of God. The logos of the Stoics, the rational structure of the universe. Mantras of Tantra, binding consciousness to divine reality. Language is not merely human, it is the bridge between the finite and the infinite, between thought and manifestation, between will and becoming. The volitional logos as reality architect. The postmodernists deconstructed meaning, but failed to reconstruct it. They exposed the illusions within language, but were blind to the divine logos, the inherent emergence of truth. The volatist understands that language is not just a tool for communication, nor merely a web of signs without reference. It is an instrument of creation, of projection of the will, an emanation of the divine mind. Thus, to master language is to master existence. To speak with clarity, precision, and purpose is to bend reality toward will. Let it be understood. Every word is an act of creation. Chapter 3. The Trial of the Luminary. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but who loses their life for my sake will find it. Matthew 16:25. The last crucible of the will. The path of volitism has led us from understanding the fractured nature of reality to reclaiming the will through awareness, alignment, and disciplined action. We have untangled the web of simulacra, sharpened our perception through epistemic refinement, and forged ourselves in the fire of praxis. Yet one final test remains, the trial of sacrifice. True volition demands more than mere self-assertion. It requires a willingness to offer up something of ourselves, to burn away comfort, attachments, or even entire aspects of our identity, in order to transcend limitation and align with the divine will. Many seek power without cost, wisdom without suffering, and transformation without surrender. But in truth, all great becoming is accompanied by a trial of relinquishment. The luminary must pass through a sacrifice, not as a burden, but as the ultimate act of conscious will. Sacrifice as the forge of the self. Sacrifice in its truest form is not merely loss, it is an alchemical transformation and transmutation. The volitist does not sacrifice arbitrarily nor in self-flagellation, but does so as an act of will transformation. Sacrifice can come in many forms. Volitional sacrifice, giving up comforts, indulgences, or distractions to sharpen the mind and purify intent. Examples: asceticism, fasting, voluntary hardship. Creative sacrifice, the deconstruction or surrender of an old creation to birth something greater. Examples: artists burning away unfinished works, writers abandoning flawed manuscripts, inventors discarding failed prototypes. Ethical sacrifice, the willingness to pay a personal price for the sake of higher values. Examples: speaking truth at a personal cost, refusing to comply with corruption, taking a principled stand. Existential sacrifice, the surrender of an old identity, belief system, or worldview that has become something new, or physically giving up one's security, comfort, or even life in service of something higher. Examples: shedding a false self, embracing radical change, undergoing spiritual rebirth, or Lawrence Oates, see below, stepping into the blizzard, a soldier throwing themselves on a grenade, or a fireman running into a burning house to save another. Material sacrifice, giving up something at real cost, your time, resources, or even bodily well-being. For example, giving away your coat in freezing weather, working tirelessly for someone else's survival, carrying another's burden at great personal expense. Egoic sacrifice, voluntarily swallowing pride, relinquishing status, or taking blame for the sake of a greater cause. Example: a leader accepting fault to shield their team, yielding in a debate to preserve harmony, abandoning recognition for unseen service. Each of these sacrifices mimics the cosmic process itself. Just as entropy dismantles, allowing new order to emerge, so too must the volitists accept the necessary forms of relinquishment. In sacrifice, we do not merely lose, we reforge. The paradox of fear and transcendence. Sacrifice is terrifying because it forces a confrontation with impermanence and ego death. Yet it is precisely this fear that makes it so potent. A coward flees the sacrifice and remains chained to their lesser self. A reckless fool throws themselves into destruction without purpose. But the volitist wields sacrifice consciously as a tool, allowing it to carve away weakness, illusion, and stagnation. This is the trial of the luminary: to feel the fear but act regardless, to surrender willingly without resentment, to endure the fire and emerge refined. The archetypal path of the sacrificial luminary. Throughout history, those who achieved true mastery understood sacrifice not as suffering, but as the crucible of becoming. They walked the path of the sacrificial luminary, willingly paying the cost for transformation. Siddhartha Gautama sacrificed his princely life, his comforts, and his attachments to attain enlightenment. Joan of Arc sacrificed her personal safety to heed divine conviction, reshaping history. Nietzsche sacrificed societal acceptance and even his own sanity in the pursuit of raw, unfiltered truth. Viktor Frankl suffered the loss of everything, yet used his suffering to forge a philosophy of meaning. The mythical phoenix is consumed in flame only to rise anew, stronger, purer, reborn. Lawrence Oates and his legendary act of self-sacrifice during the ill-fated Terra Nova expedition. His final words, "I am just going outside, and I may be some time," are one of the most haunting and noble examples of voluntary sacrifice in human history. Oates, suffering from severe frostbite and gangrene, knew that his deteriorating condition was slowing down the team's desperate attempt to return from the South Pole. Instead of forcing his comrades to wait for his inevitable demise, he made the ultimate sacrifice, walking out into the freezing Antarctic blizzard, alone, knowing he would not return. He did this not as an act of despair, but of defiant will, choosing to give up his life for his fellow explorers so that his fellow explorers had a greater chance of survival. Oates' story exemplifies the highest echelon of volitional sacrifice, one that goes beyond self-mastery into profound alignment with something greater than the self. He did not simply endure suffering, he chose it willingly, embraced it fully, and made it meaningful. Each of these figures embraced the death of something old to give birth to something greater. This is the final challenge of volitism. To become more, we must be willing to let go. The ritual of offering. The Volatists does not merely theorize sacrifice, they practice it. To conclude the journey, one must undergo a ritual of offering, the final act of volitional sacrifice. Select something to offer. This must be meaningful, something that holds weight in your life. It may be an indulgence, an attachment, an outdated belief, or even a cherished object. Contemplate its grip. Reflect on how it binds you, how it shapes your habits, and whether it serves your becoming. Create a ceremony of surrender. Symbolically destroy, relinquish, or give away what no longer serves your highest will. If it's a habit or indulgent, commit to severance. If it's an object, burn it, bury it, or release it into the world. Witness the transformation. Do not lament the loss. Observe what emerges in the void left behind. Strength, clarity, liberation. The mark of true sacrifice is that it carves away illusion to reveal something greater underneath. The ritual of living sacrifice. Unlike the previous ritual of offering, which focuses on personal relinquishment, this ritual demands outward action, a sacrifice that serves another being, be it human, animal, or even a broader cause. Find a need that demands cost. Seek an opportunity where helping another will cost you something significant, be it comfort, security, or well-being. Engage in the act without hesitation. Do not overthink. Act. Give what is needed fully without resentment or expectation. Witness the weight of the gift. Reflect not on what you lost, but on what was gained by another. See how the will, when given freely, becomes something far greater than the self. True sacrifice is not about self-destruction. It is about willingly taking on the burden so another does not have to. It is an assertion of control, not of relinquishment. It is an act of divine will manifesting through the individual, transcending selfishness and aligning with something greater than personal survival. Sacrifice is the final secret of volitism, that the will is not only strengthened through struggle, but through the conscious sacrifice of self in service of something beyond it. The fractured light, at last, realigns. The pilgrim of the fractured light. The shattering. There once was a light that was whole. It was neither bright nor dim, neither moving nor still. It simply was. Within it, all things lay in perfect unity, indistinct yet complete. But the light longed to see itself, and so it fractured. A great shattering sent thousands and thousands of shards scattering into the abyss. Each shard carried a piece of the whole, yet in breaking away, they forgot who they were. In time, they became souls, wandering through shadowed lands, seeking what was lost but could not be named. Thus, the world was born, and in this world, there was a man, the sleeping pilgrim. The man had no name, for he had never chosen one. He lived as all others lived, moving where the winds of the world blew him, thinking the thoughts given to him, dreaming the dreams placed in his mind. He was a child of comfort and sorrow, lulled by the hum of familiar illusions. Yet at night, he felt a quiet ache of something unremembered. One evening, he found himself before a still black lake, its waters like polished obsidian. When he gazed into it, he saw not his reflection, but a great broken mirror beneath the surface, cracked and webbed, stretching endlessly into darkness. And there, between the fractures, he saw something watching him back. A voice not heard but felt rippled through the air. "Why do you sleep?" The man opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. He did not know that he was asleep. The reflection shifted, the cracks in the mirror widened, and from them poured the web of simulacra, writhing tendrils of tangled images and whispered words. A great shadow of shifting forms rose from the depths, its voice 1,000 voices. Be still, rest in us, there is nothing beyond. And for the first time in his life, the man did not believe it. So he stepped forward into the lake and into the unknown, and he fell. The descent. Down, down, down he plunged through the veils of images that were not his own. He saw the stories, the beliefs, and the desires of others layered upon him like endless masks. And in that fall he realized he did not know which face was truly his. Through the abyss he glimpsed the fragments of the fractured light, scattered and dim. Some drifted like embers on an unseen current. Others were buried beneath the weight of formless shadows. He reached out for them, but the shadows coiled around his limbs, pulling him deeper. And in that moment of struggle, he understood. The fractured light could not be taken. It had to be reclaimed. So he ceased struggling. He let go of all that was false, all that was borrowed. And as he did, a single shard of light, small but unmistakably his, blazed forth from within. The shadows recoiled, the fall became flight, and the man rose. The reclamation. He awoke upon a mountain of stone, the lake far below, the world stretched before him. But he was no longer who he had been. His eyes had changed. The world was not a shapeless thing, but a tapestry of symbols woven with meaning. Every rock, every tree, every wind that touched his skin spoke in a language beyond words. He saw the patterns hidden beneath the noise. He saw the webs that sought to pull him back into forgetfulness. And above all, he saw the path, the one that has always been there, waiting for him to walk it with will. And so he became a pilgrim, not a wanderer, but a seeker of wholeness. He did not run from entropy, nor shun the fractured world. Instead, he moved through it, reclaiming lost light wherever he found it, forging himself anew with every step, flawlessly reordering and reintegrating himself with every movement, reordering, reintegrating, and synthesizing the divine cosmos. He saw through hyperspace like the reflection of a pool's ripples on the ceiling on a sunny day. He was the Tesseract. He did not know what lay at the journey's end, but he knew this. He would walk it with open eyes, unbroken will, and a heart that burned with the fire of undying light. As he walked, he looked up to the heavens, where the stars burned in defiance of the void. A realization struck him, deep and wordless. The fractured light had never truly shattered. It had only hidden itself, waiting to be reclaimed, waiting for those who would wake and walk, waiting for those who would return.